Welcome to the Fine Print, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Caleb Teskey, and today I am joined by Darrick Grannai from Bushy Beard up in Derby, man. Darrick, happy birthday, motherfucker.
Hey, thanks.
Thanks for doing this on your birthday and spending an hour trying to get that fucking background up, man. We'll figure that out next time.
It didn't work.
We tried hard though. That's what matters, you know.
They were the old college dry.
Yeah. So Darrick, you know, boy, how long's it been since I had you on? I want to say that was back in May, June, somewhere in there. Maybe
I think it was like June.
Yeah. Okay.
Somewhere in that area.
So we're about, let's say we're 6 months out from when I interviewed you last, man. Where are we at, man? I imagine some things have changed.
Yeah. Getting close to being done and getting my inspection. It's been a real long road getting here. It's been longer than I anticipated. My anticipated completion date was October 1st. But that's obviously come and gone. And since about November 1st, I've heard 2 more weeks. And here we are almost 2 more months after that. But you know, like it's not really at this point. I'm so heavily invested into the whole ordeal that you don't really have much choice but to keep going forward and try to figure out ways to make that happen.
I heard you say that when we were, you know, up there with it was, thanks for having me up there, by the way. That night we were hanging out with Nick Matei and Devin Daly. Like I was hearing you mention how you've gone well over your expected budget here for this project.
Oh yeah. I guess I'm not alone on that. It sounds like a lot of people did, but I would, you know, I plan to go over. I understand, like, you know, when you go into any type of project, you're just gonna more than likely you're gonna go over and not under. So I did, you know, I planned for about 20%, 20 to 25% to go over, and it's gonna be closer to like 45 or 50% more than anticipated.
Damn.
And there's a couple big reasons for that. You know, one was there was a huge mistake on the material gentleman's side, not the contractor, but the company that handled my materials quote. They really kind of dropped the ball and really, you know, put me in a really tough spot. But like I said, working through it and really can't really dwell on it. I was fortunate enough to where I could go back to the lending agency and basically explain what happened and show them, you know, the proof that it wasn't my fault, so to speak. It wasn't something that I didn't plan on. It was just a total drop of the ball of the materials company. You know, the gentleman lost his job and all that, which great, but at the same time, that doesn't help me. And it's never good to see someone lose a job. But the mistake was so grand that, you know, they didn't really have a choice. You know, like he messed up so bad, and they admitted eventually to the mistake. But at the end of the day, like they said, you know, you need the materials. We're not going to give them to you, and if you want to finish the project, this is what it's going to cost to get the remaining materials.
So he tried to tax you.
Basically, yeah. Well, basically, what happened was I went to the company to put together my budget and stuff while I was doing my business plan and all that, and got my quote. And that's another big thing I learned in this whole process is, you know, up until now, I thought a quote, you know, if acted upon in 10 days or whatever the terms was, that was, you know, almost like binding in stone. Like if they quote you out for this price, then if it comes in over that, then they hold to the quote. But I learned real quick that I was very wrong in that a quote is no different really than an estimate. So the material company, you know, these lumber companies and material companies, they have the language built right into their quotes that says, you know, even if we screw up, no matter how big the screw up is, it's not on us.
So they've written off any kind of liability.
Right. They don't hold any liability for the mistake. And what happened was I had DPS panels out of Arizona quote the whole project, and they came in with a number, and the problem with, and I really wanted to use them because it reduced everything. It reduced my installation cost. It reduced my materials cost. It allowed the project, if I ever moved buildings, it could easily be broken down and moved because of it was like a modular type design, and it was really nice. The problem with it was, at the time when I was talking to them, they could not guarantee me material for at least 6 months, and they were thinking it was going to be more like 8 months before they could get any material, which meant they were going to be able to basically deliver the material anytime between January 1st of 2023 and April of 2023. And at the time I was like, well, that just don't work. That means if it doesn't come into then, and I got more, then we got to build it still and do all this stuff, it's going to be another 4 or 5 months. So I was looking at the end of 2023 if I went that route, which I hadn't completely wrote off. If the price was exponentially higher to go with, a local company, I was just going to wait. Well, I went to 2 local companies. One came back and was higher for phase 1 than this other company was for the whole building. Well, the other company, they came in at like 13 or 14,000 more than the Arizona company, but they said it was for the whole thing. And I said, well, to get everything done basically a year ahead of time and for 14 or 15,000 more, I'm willing to make that sacrifice.
That seems like a straight deal to support a local business,
Right. And that was exactly it. And I'm like, yep, this is the way I'm going to go. And it is a Vermont company that, is who I went with, and they're, locally owned, and their management, they've done almost as much as they could, after realizing that their salesman made a huge mistake.
How much did that cost you, Darrick? Do you care to put a number on that?
Yeah, I don't even want to. I don't even want to. Like,
wow, it's that bad, huh?
It's a lot. Yeah, you could. It's a lot. Like a lot. So
damn.
So it yeah. And when I had a meeting with them the first time, they're like, well, how could you think it was so much less than the other guy in town? And I said, because the guy in Arizona was less than both of you for the whole thing. Because what happened, we were getting through phase 1 and we were almost done. Me and the contractor are like looking at each other, and I'm like, where's all the material? And he's like, I was wondering the same thing. So the salesman stops by and I'm like, when are you bringing us the rest of the material? He goes, that's all the material you got. I said, no, we got 3 more rooms to be built out. We got the upstairs. I'm like, we still got a bunch of stuff to be done. And he looked at me and he goes, oh, I didn't quote you any of that. And I was like, what? I said, the quote you gave me was for like probably 60% of the building. There was still 40% of the building that he hadn't quoted me out on. And I had meetings with him and the management staff, and I asked him, me and the contractor, several times, this is for everything? This is for everything. He's like, yep. And when we had our other meeting about the screw up, and I said, the contractor asked you what the deal is. And he said, well, yeah, but we thought you meant everything for phase 1. I said, no, if I meant that, I would have said everything for phase 1. I said, we made that decision at the beginning. We were doing phase 1 and 2 together. There's no, let's not wait, blah, blah, blah. So that was, like I said, that was probably the biggest issue that I've run into in this whole project. And if it wasn't for that, I would have been, between that and I had an electrical issue, same thing. And that wasn't so much the guy's fault, that was the market. Like, I went and got priced out for wire, for the amount of wire, and I needed a good amount of wire. So I went and got priced out for wire, and they came back with a price of like $16,000, which
for
was
everything
pretty reasonable at the time. And 4 months later, we go to buy that same wire, and the guy gives me an invoice for 60 grand. And I was like, what? Like, what just happened here? And he's like, well, man, I gave you that quote 4 months ago. I said, yeah, 4 months ago. We're not talking 4 years ago, a year ago. We're talking 3 and I said, if we're being technical, it's like 3.5 months. Wow. I said, and he's like, well, aluminum and copper has gone through the roof. and everything you need is aluminum and copper. So I immediately canceled that order because I was like, this is crazy.
What is he, friends with the other guy?
The guy selling the wine. No. And
like
I
the
said,
first guy was like, yo, you could jack him up.
Right. And I said, no, I canceled the order. And the electrician was like, oh my God, I don't know what we're going to do. And I'm like, I don't either, but let me get on the good old internet and start scouring the country for this wire. And I was able to find it for like 21,000 less. So I got it for like 37,000 for the wire I needed, but that was still more than double what they had told me just 3.5 months prior. So that, and then there was another fairly significant issue with the plumbers not communicating with the electricians, and they installed all this electrical equipment for a single phase heaters when we wanted 3-phase. That was we were told when we at this meeting with the plumbers that they couldn't get 3-phase. We can't get the 3-phase for a year to 18 months. And if you want to be operating before then, you're going to have to go this route. So again, I met with the electrician. I'm like, how much more? He's like, we can do this. It's just going to cost more money. And he's like, because you're going to need more wire. You're going to need another transformer. He's like, you're going to need it. So we figured out what that's going to cost and whatnot. And again, it was a decent chunk, but at the same time, it wasn't a crazy amount. And I was like, well, if that's, between that and the other thing, if that's what I got to pay to come to market 6-8 months sooner, I think it's worth it. So I agreed to it. They do all this work, like 2 months go by, the heaters show up, we go to put the heaters in, they're all 3-phase. So literally all this extra electric work we did was now obsolete. It never been used, but we couldn't use any of it. So it's like I lost a week's worth of labor for 3 electricians, plus myself, plus I lost the material of the disconnects because now I don't need 8 disconnects. So those 3 things pushed me over budget a lot. Like I said, like those 3 alone was like 30% over my total budget just on those 3 items. Yeah. And that's what's been the biggest stress on this whole thing. That and just getting people to do the work.
It sounds like a little bit of a lemony snicket here, man. Like a series of unfortunate events.
Yeah. I mean, I talked to people who've done this like multiple times or one time, and everybody I talk to and I tell them my story, they're like, yeah, that sounds not too crazy. Like I haven't had anybody be like, oh my, who's done it, who's been like, oh my God, yeah, that's horrible. When I talk to people from Massachusetts, they're still like, you're still getting it done for the type of facility I'm building. They still tell me I'm still getting it done for a really good deal.
Well, they're paying outrageous prices.
Right. And that's the thing, like they're paying 4 to 4.5 times, 3.5 to 4 times more for a facility like mine in Massachusetts.
I'd say that's spot on, or
like ballpark. Basically what I was told by this one lady, she said that my whole project is going to end up costing like 100,000 more than just their floors. She's like, just for us to do our floors is a crazy amount because they have to have some type of special flooring, I guess she said, that meets. I guess when I look at those things, it's, like I guess I look at them to try to keep myself sane.
Well, they also have a lot more money down in Massachusetts.
You hit it on the head. Like they're a lot bigger state. There's a lot more people. There's a lot more money in those areas. So sure, maybe you could invest 4 times as much, but you're gonna have 4 times the return as well.
And I got to tell you, I haven't seen really any impressive weed coming out of any of those joints in Massachusetts. I smoked $100 ounce with my buddy when I went to Vegas. I rolled up to his place in Westford and he said, oh, I got this $100 ounce from a dispensary. I said, oh, fuck yeah. I'm like, who owns it? He said, I don't know. It's called Mayflower. So I'm like, well, let's find out. I was like, Ianthus. Like, okay, that's an MSO. Cool. Let's see what $100 MSO ounce looks like. And he opened it and I mean, it looked decent, but it smelled off, dude. Like it smelled funky, but not in a good way. You know, like honestly, I didn't even. I took a hit of it just because I was curious, but a little bit. But
oh yeah,
I smoked my own weed. I was just like, man, something doesn't smell right with that.
yeah. I feel you. I had a back in it was beginning of this summer, maybe even before. There was two gentlemen from Massachusetts. They were up here, and for all I know, they are involved in the Vermont market, but they were up here and they were basically just kind of feeling things out. And they had 3 cultivation facilities and 2 dispensaries. 2 of them were in Maine. I mean, 2 of them were in Mass. One was in Maine. There are 2 in Mass. One was 55,000 square foot flowering canopy. So the building was like 100,000 square feet. And their other one was a 50,000 square foot flowering canopy. And I had a really good talk with these guys, and they had done pretty well financially with it, they had said, but their biggest thing, because him and I got talking and I was talking about what my idea was. And he's like, I've been doing this for 12 years now. He said, and I can confidently tell you that if anybody on my scale tries to tell someone like yourself that we're going to consistently produce a higher quality flower than the smaller guys, so they're lying to you. And to me, that was really like, I like that. I appreciated that. Here's a guy who's doing it and he's being honest and telling you, yes, we produce, mids basically. And he's like, but when you're growing on our scale, it's if you can achieve mids every run,
you just send it to extraction.
Right. They're like, we're okay. And they can sell it too. Like they're able to sell it in their stores. But his thing was, he's like, I'm sick of growing mids. I want to grow top shelf. And that's kind of how because of my conversation with those guys and them showing me their setup, that's kind of how I came to be where I am.
Can I tell you a quick story? Let me interject real quick, because just yesterday I interviewed an employee from a dispensary in Massachusetts, in Westfield, and she had just got fired. Like 2 weeks before Christmas, they fired her she said it was over nothing really. And she said the boss didn't even say a word to her. She just showed up to work and he handed her a check and went, and then like pushed her out the door, and that was it. But I did think it was interesting. What's the name of the place? Heku or something. It's named after an Egyptian god. He spent like $15 million building that place out, and they have a cultivation facility. And they hired her, and she said, yeah, I had 0 experience. And I'm like, okay, that sounds pretty familiar, And she said, yeah, the guys in the extraction lab, they were construction workers, and some of the other people working in the cultivation room, they didn't have experience. And the management, they didn't have experience, and then, the results show themselves. You can put as much money as you want into building a fancy dispensary. But
you gotta be able to operate it, and you gotta be able to have the knowledge to grow the product.
But you're right. They were stacking. They have like the stacking, like the multi-level tiers. And she said, yeah, that stuff up there, it would get too close to the lights and that would get burned. She said they had another room where she called them the bad bugs, with just mites everywhere. They had 12 cultivation rooms. And she said this one was full of mites. And she said, rather than like clean it out and just get it all fucking sanitized, they would just like, every time they left the room, they would just spray themselves off with alcohol. And the boss was like, no, this will make sure you don't contaminate the other rooms. It's like, no, it won't. Like,
you might as well just take care of the problem.
You got 12 rooms, dude. Like, it'll be fine if you don't use one, and he's like,
and you can have that room back up and running in no time, especially depending, I don't know how big his room is, but you can just heat treat the room. Like, that's the best, in my opinion, that's one of the best ways on top of your your beneficial predator mites and stuff of that nature and beneficial bugs, but just chop everything down, clean everything thoroughly with a sanitizer solution. I'm from the restaurant industry, so I still run with my traditional Sani solution that I've run with in the restaurant industry for years, because it works.
It works. Yeah.
I go through everything. If I ever had any type of mite concerns or mite issues, because let's face it, that's probably going to happen at some point in time. If you've grown long enough, you've dealt with a lot of these things. And, you flip the heat on, you bring your room up to, anything above 120 for a sustained period of time is going to probably do the trick. But I like the 145, 150. Now, if you're running CO2 and your tanks are in the room, kind of be wary of that. They do have a pressure, valve, and they will pop at a certain temp.
Can you crank your heat up that high? You can
What's
get your
that?
room, you can get the temperatures in your room up to 140, 150.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And I also, if like, depending on your light setups and stuff, like you could possibly do it with just your lights, but I have a heater that I can hook up to the rooms and pump. I can bring a room up to about 280, 290, and I can melt the walls if I want.
We're gonna have a sauna up there, dude. I could really use a good sweat.
Yeah, no, it's literally, and that's something that I started doing a couple years ago. Is in between runs, I heat treat a room for like 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours. I'll bring it up to 100 and, like I said, 140, 145. One of my rooms I can only get to 130, but like I said, anything above 120 for 90 minutes will just about kill everything. So me being a living soil guy, I put extremely cold water onto my beds. I'll probably put 50 gallons per 4x8, 50 to 80 gallons of really cold water.
I like how you have the taps coming right out of the walls too. That was cool.
Yeah, like, and before I do it, I do that to try to preserve as much of the microbial life, in my soil as I can. The mites tend not to go down like too deep. So as the first inch or two heats up and kills, all the beneficial and pest in that's okay. But I try to keep, that bottom 12, 14 inches, not to get above 100, because I'm trying to keep my microbes and everything in line. But even after I heat treat, I always do a re-inoculant. I'll brew a really strong microbe tea, and I'll go back through it and treat all the beds just to be sure that the microbe life is good. But I also, depend on vermicompost quite a bit in my bed. So I want to keep my worms alive too. So it's kind of like a 2-part thing where I don't want all my worms dying off and I don't want my microbes dying off. So
can you tell me a little bit about the worms? What'd you call it?
Vermicompost. Okay. So like I run all no-till. So it's not KNF, I'm not to that point yet. Big concern, because I've had a couple people say, well, why don't you just go KNF? Well, at this point, KNF, sure, it's great. It can be very sustainable, but it's also very smelly. Like, it's great for outdoors, but you make those, those J dams and those J labs, and the process of making those can really produce some foul smelling stuff.
What's a J dam and a J lab?
It's basically, it's like a homemade fertilizer. It's just different cultures, and you create those cultures like this. They're pretty simple. Like, a lot of them are just different types of plants that you pulverize up, you put in a bucket, and unlike a tea, you don't brew it. You just let it sit, and it starts to degrade. Now, you don't want it to go anaerobic, because then it gets even smellier, but it's basically just like rotting, decaying matter in your water. And then after, depending on what you're going for, like, there's a million different recipes out there for, like, if you're trying to get nitrogen or phosphorus or potassium or whatever you're going for, there's a bunch of different recipes you can create. And what's nice about it is, if you're, especially for outdoor growers, you create the circle at your farm. You're like, okay, these are all my plants. You plant all the plants you want to use for making your fertilizer, so to speak. You can plant those all over your farm, and then when you need them, you just go cut them down. What is in those, you use those. So you've created this whole loop at your farm. But for indoor, it's a lot more difficult, I feel. I mean, I would need a whole nother room that was sealed off just to ferment these different types of
like fruit juices and shit, right?
It's very similar to that. Yeah, that would be a good comparison, I think.
And I saw my homie Eduardo Jaime there. He was telling me he'll take he said, I'm Puerto Rican, so I was born knowing how to cook rice. Right. He says he rinsed the rice off, and he'll take the rinsed rice water and mix it with milk. and then seal it up, and that will create like curds and whey, some kind of probiotic action.
Yep.
Which
That's exactly like what some of them are. You know, like I said, it just depends on what stage you're in and what you're looking. And they can be very potent. Like literally, some of them, it's like 1 tablespoon of it per 5 gallons of liquid.
That's what he said, dude. The amount of money that he said he spends to make these things was just pennies on the dollar.
Oh yeah, if you get it down, like I said, especially if you do it at your farm where you're growing all your own plants and everything, I think it's one of the most economical ways to cultivate anything.
I thought it was genius, man. You said coffee grounds and shit. He's like,
oh yeah, coffee grounds, eggshells, vinegar. There's a whole bunch of different stuff. Like vinegar, that's homemade remedies that you can use. Milkweed, marigolds, just a whole bunch of stuff like that. Grass is great. It's really high nitrogen source. Just lawn clippings, you know, like stuff like that nature. You know,
you can make like fertilizer amendments out of grass.
Yeah, lawn clippings. Yeah, you cut it. I use the lawn clippings quite a bit. It's a good nitrogen source. So for outdoor, not indoor as much because, you know, again, you're bringing pests and stuff in. Outdoor, you've got that whole ecosystem that's already thriving.
True.
So when you add it to your beds outdoors, they've already got all the beneficial bugs that are combating, you know, huge breakouts already out there. Like I had an issue very beginning of the year. I always tried to do a couple seed plants outdoors just for the shits and giggles. And I don't know, a couple weeks into it, I saw like 3 or 4 aphids, and I was like, oh, I better spray something, go create something, use some citrus juice or Dawn soap, whatever. And then I saw a couple ladybugs, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna let nature do its thing. Came back like 2 weeks later, not one aphid on the plant. Everything was good. We had a larger population of ladybugs, and everybody was happy. That kind of stuff don't happen indoors unless you make it happen. So that's why I haven't done, you know, the full KNF, but I do no-till, so I don't use any bottled nutrients. I use all amendments. I depend really heavily on the soil food web, and that's kind of how I gear my plants is, you know, as long as I've got good quality soil and the soil's taken care of, then my plants are going to thrive. There are a few cultivars out there that, you know, require a little bit of like supplemental feeding. One that comes to mind is like some of the chem strains. Like some of the chem strains, I have to add, you know, a little bit more magnesium or calcium a lot of times because they seem to need it a little more than a lot of my other stuff. So that's the one, I would say, downside of the no-till process is it's not a like one application covers it all type deal. Like if you're growing in buckets and you're running, you know, some chems here and some diesels there, you can tailor your feed regimen to make sure the room is good. In my situation, it's a little bit tougher to do that. With that being said, how I remedy that is I do, instead of like one long bed, I do 4 4x8s end to end. And that way, if I have some strain that I know needs additional CalMag, I just make that bed richer in it. And that's the bed I use to run that particular strain. So it just takes a little more planning and thought, but it's still achievable, just like anything else. And I believe, you know, cultivating in the no-till organic setup, you know, with no pesticides and no synthetic nutrients used is just a cleaner, healthier way to cultivate cannabis or food or anything, you know, like it's kind of how I look at it. I was a chef for a lot of years, and what went into my food that I used for my clients and customers was important. You know, I wanted to know how the farm grew their vegetables, how the farm grew their beef, like what were their methods. And I didn't want to use a bunch of synthetic stuff if I had other alternatives. And that's kind of how, you know, I feel with cannabis. Like I'm not going to say I don't consume salt grown or synthetic grown cannabis. I'm just saying if someone gives me an option between the two, I'm going to go with the organic stuff every time. If it's especially if I know the cultivator and know, like, because anyone can throw a label on organic and they can still be doing a ton of damage to the environment. Like sometimes
or
it's like a
lying
loophole.
to you also.
Right.
There's
Or
been a lot of
lying.
that I've seen in other states happen.
You know, there's a ton of organic practices that can cause just as many issues to the environment as synthetic stuff. You know, look at the state of Vermont's a great example. You know, we use cow manure to spread on the fields, but when you spread cow manure real heavy and it gets into the lakes, that's a ton of nitrogen going into the lake, and it causes problems. It causes algae blooms, it kills fish, it kills pets if they drink it. Like, it's a serious problem. Now, I get it, farmers been doing this for centuries in Vermont, but we're learning, and we've learned that it's a serious issue, and it's organic.
Dude, I'm right there with you. You know, and I love farmers, man. They're some of the best people you ever meet. They work their asses off. But it's like, yo, that shit that's going into the river is fucking up the water.
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. And I love to fish. So to think that it could ruin, you know, an entire ecosystem, and now you don't get to enjoy that aspect of life, get to go out fishing and with your friends or your family, you know, there's got to be a balance. You know, and that was a big reason on the design of my facility is I tried to do everything as sustainable and as environmentally friendly as we could. You know, I'm not blind or naive to the fact that the amount of electricity we use to do this indoors, you know, is not environmentally friendly.
What's your electric bill look like every month, or what do you think it might look like?
It's going to be high. You know, I'm running 100. It's got 88 and 70 or 68, 88, 68, 100, and I'm running like 152 lights for flower. And then I've got another 36 for veg and another 20 for my mother room, and then a bunch of clone sticks, like 50, 60 clone sticks. So yeah, we're pulling a lot of power. And on top of that, my heat and AC and, you know, and all that is electric as well. So it's definitely, you know, a large power consumption. It's something that, you know, we've got to make sure that we're producing, you know, a good quality product. And just to circle back to what I was saying earlier, how I ended up on a facility like mine was talking to those guys from Maine and Mass and getting the getting the like information from them. They basically were saying how you can't really produce a quality product. They felt after doing it multiple times, you know, anything bigger than like a 2,500 square foot flowering canopy. They said that's really like the optimal size to keep a craft quality product. They said once you start getting over that size, it becomes much more difficult to manage. And they found, you know, in their 12 years of research, that seemed to be, you know, the point where things started to go the other way. They said up until that point, you know, things were good. And that's what they were doing. They were selling off their two big facilities in Mass, and they were building a craft facility in Maine.
And I've seen a lot of that. I've seen a lot of people who come in and just get a little too big for their own britches right off the bat. And some of them really, quite frankly, their lack of experience and then making a move like that, it's like, wow, you're really not like an experienced grower, and clearly you're not very adept in the business world either. And that's troubling. It's like you just have a lot of money.
Well, that's the thing, like some people, there's a Vermont, you know, it's I'm not going to say there's not a handful of people in Vermont who are, you know, trying to get the cash grab, but a lot of the people I have met, it seems like they're doing it for the right reasons. You know, like myself, we just love to cultivate, and this is what we've been waiting for years. You know, and it's, you know, like I said, I know there's a couple out there who it was the opposite. They just
there's one in every bunch, isn't there?
Right, but you know, and that's kind of what I was hoping for from the get-go, was Vermont was going to be a little different than some of these other states. You know, we were going to have, you know, a more craft-based market, so to speak.
I actually think it's not going to play out like that, but I actually agree with you. I do think, dude, there's a ton of good people. Actually, I was ready to give this project up back in April, and then I met with fucking Nick Matei, and it was like somebody said his name when we were out in public, and I was just like, what was that? I know that guy. And then I was like, I'm going to get a hold of him, and I did, and he pointed me in some directions and really kickstarted me, so like,
yep.
There's a ton of good people here. Honestly, I'm kind of shocked that I haven't met more shitty people. I was hoping to meet.
Like, I've been pleasantly surprised at, the amount of people. And Nick and I have talked about that quite a bit. Is, are things gonna change? Once we really start getting rolling, are people gonna start becoming, more cutthroat and, like we hear about in other states? Like, and Nick and I have talked at length about this together. At like, we really don't want to do that. Him and I could definitely view each other as direct competition, because I guess in reality we are somewhat of a competition.
You're both, when I listen to you guys talking, it's definitely like, I'm like, whoa, it's like a jousting match. I'm like, these guys are fucking good here. Like,
yeah, like we don't want, neither one of us, I can't speak for him, but just by our conversations, like neither one of us want to come to that. Like, we want the opposite. We want to try to figure out ways to where we're working together, and we're uplifting each other. So we have a few ideas that we're gonna, bring to fruition here in the coming months once I'm up and rolling, and he's got a few harvests under his belt and stuff like that. Like, we definitely have some stuff we want to do, and we think it could be cool because both of us have the same mindset of, like rec cannabis, a lot of times, a lot of states gets a bad rep. And I understand.
Well, they fucked it. To be fair, they fucked it up pretty much.
I was gonna say, I totally understand why. I totally get it, because being honest, a lot of times it isn't that great. You gotta wade through a bunch of junk to find the few that are doing it right. And in every state, there are a handful that are doing it right. And you're always going to have those people, no matter how good you do it, still don't think you're doing it right and have something to say. But you just gotta, I think, just stay true to yourself and to the plant and just produce a quality product. And if you've been consuming cannabis for as long as I have, you're honest with yourself, what's good and what's not, and if it doesn't meet your expectations, then you need to figure out how you want to handle that. And I don't think, putting it as a top shelf product is the way to go. There's other options. You can market it as that it's mids. Maybe you were doing a pheno hunt and it didn't come out as good as you.
Yeah, maybe you're inexperienced, dude, and you're just like really passionate about it. And you're like, look, man, like I'm learning, but like I've seen
even the most experienced, like Nick will tell you, even the most experienced growers are gonna run into issues. Like, that's gonna happen, especially your first run or two in a new grow area, like
right before you get dialed in there,
right, it's going to take you a minute to get stuff dialed in. Your first run is definitely not going to be as good as your 20th run. Like, it's not going to be that way. And I'm not saying you can't get really good quality right off the bat. It's just might be more of a challenge to get there because you're learning your room and it's requiring a lot more work than what is going to be needed down the road. Yeah, there's a lot of, obstacles that can arise, but I just really hope that we can all figure out how to, work with each other. Like, I would love to be able to put something together with like half a dozen growers that come like myself from the legacy side and who have come to the rec side and put some type of package or something together that shows that, our product is every bit as good as you're going to find on the black market.
Put a mixtape together. You do a mix like pre-rolled pack with like a 4-bit, like
we have like I said, we have a couple different ideas we've kicked around and a couple of them we really like, and I think consumers would like them. And there's just a couple of them have a decent amount of logistics involved, and like I said, we're all focused right now on just getting going and starting to get some cash flow into our businesses and to just figure the lay of the land out. But come summer or next fall, I think a lot of us will be looking at that next step, like, okay, set up. We've got this whole distribution thing figured out. We've got all our packaging all done. You know, everything's good. We've had 3, 4, 5 harvests. And now we need to, you know, up the bar, so to speak, start bringing some different products. Because there's no reason that we can't have all the products that any other state has, you know, like a California or a Maine or whatever. Like, we have very talented people right here in Vermont. And one thing, you know, about Vermonters is willing to work hard, a lot of us, you know, and
dude, stupid hard. You fucking lazy stoners. You're like up at 5
right.
in
And
the
that's
morning.
another big, you know, area that it's nice to prove people wrong. Like, hey, look, we don't fit your stereotype, so to speak. We can run a successful business. We can contribute to the community. Yeah, and those are all things that I really hope to bring. Like, we're located in, you know, the Northeast Kingdom, and it's a pretty economically depressed area. So if I can bring 10 to 12 job, you know, good paying jobs and 2 to 3 high paying jobs to this area, that is, you know, a really good benefit to the community.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. I'd work for you. Let me know if you're hiring.
That means a lot. Thanks. So, you
probably
know, and
need
I've
to
had a good amount of people that I've spoke to. You know, I've hired a couple, but like I said, we're not quite there. I think January for the first of the year is when we're gonna officially like start punching a time clock and all that for the facility. So that will be nice, but it's you know, it's been a long road to get here. But
I know I've been watching you guys for a year, man, and I could just see the fucking stress.
yeah, it doesn't, and then, you know, it doesn't get cheaper every, you know, tomorrow. It gets, today's price isn't tomorrow's price. And that's that's been something I've heard a lot.
Didn't you say you had to pay a bunch of money to run like cable for internet or something out from the street?
Oh yeah, I just finished that yesterday. I so they charged me $7,200, but yeah, so which at first I was like, of course it is. Of course it's basically 10 grand. Everything's 10 grand. Like, sure. But after I really started talking to a gentleman who works for Comcast and explaining to him that, you know, everything seems to cost a bunch of money, he nicely gave me some information about a forgiveness program that Comcast offers for businesses.
Oh shit.
So I applied for that. Well, he applied for that for me. And they approved it. So they covered the cost of the install. So that was great. So no money out of pocket. They would cover up to 7,500 of the install, and it came to like 72 or 7,300.
I was gonna say, you are pretty far back from the road there.
Right. Like, no, 300 feet. And that's been the issue, like with the power. Like, I needed to run all that heavy wire 300 feet. Plus I had to have 900 feet of coping, because you had to have 3 separate wires coming off the thing, because each one had to go through its own coping or conduit. So, and of course, because of COVID, conduit had gone up 400%. And it's been a nightmare with that kind of stuff. But
well, hey, you saved a little money on internet, dude.
yeah, I saved a little money on internet, and it's been, yeah. So, you know, like I said, at this point, I had to go back, you know, to the lending institution and schmooze them to increase my line of credit a little bit for operating costs. Like, I had enough to finish the project. It's just was the operating costs started to get a little sketchy. So they issued an additional line of credit for operating costs.
You had to schmooze them a little bit?
Yeah. I had to do, believe me, I was there. I brought knee pads with me. If that's what I had to do, like, it's like, hey, you know,
just an over the pants handy. That's it.
Yeah, whatever you boys need, like, I'm your man. So it was, yeah, and that was those were a tough 2 meetings, because they really didn't want to do it at first, but after explaining to them the situation and what was at hand and this and that, they were like, well, we understand, and we'll make sure we extend your line of credit to whatever it needs to be to get this up and going and operational. So that was a decent, little bit of stress off from my plate. so to speak, but it wasn't all of it, because at the end of the day, I'm still responsible for every dime I take. So I really
Dusty said, until we start selling weed,
right.
Yeah.
It's like great. They're like, oh, we'll extend your line of credit. It's like, that's nice. I appreciate that. And I need that. But
what if
I'm
I go
still
broke?
responsible. Right. I'm still responsible for that. And that's just that much more I'm responsible for. And that's just that much more stress that I have to deal with. But, you know, hopefully in a year from today, you know, this will just be a cool story. And we'll be like, hey, cool story.
I hope so
And that'll
too,
be
man.
it.
There was something else. Running electrical underground versus on the pole. Oh yeah, I guess we just kind of hit that a little bit.
I'm too far. Like, so if you run it on over like from pole to pole, it's cheaper and it's actually like a little more efficient, because that wire, especially up here in the winter, like that wire gets hot, and when it's out in the air and it can cool down faster, so you don't lose nearly as much power to resistance. So if you can run it aerial, you know, it seems from what they made it sound to me like that was a preferred method. If you could run it aerial, you can get away with running like a little bit smaller of a wire. You don't need all the conduit. You're at the mercy of the elements a little more. Like if you get a high windstorm and this and that, you could lose power. But where I'm located right by the hospital, and they did like a power assessment because they were wondering if we needed generators or not. And in the last 25 years, there hadn't been a power outage on that line for more than like 6 hours. So there was no need for me to do a generator, because the hospital has to have power. So whenever there's like a major storm, they're the first ones to get power restored. And we just happen to be on the same line as them. Plus there's a big mill just down the road, and it's the same type of deal. So we lucked out there. Like that was nice, because if not, if we were someplace more out in the sticks, we might have had to do a generator, you know, because those places lose power 2, 3, 4 days sometimes, and that can be catastrophic.
How long can your power go out before you're going to start to have serious problems in a grow facility?
I mean, I guess it depends on your stage, like obviously, and how far along. Like if you're at the beginning of flower, you could probably get through with like 2 to 3 days before you start to see like some serious problems. But, you know, a day is probably, you know, once you start getting over that day mark, you know, things can start getting a little hairy. I've had times, like I said, where timer got kicked off or something, and I was away or whatever and didn't have power for 3 days during flower. And I came back and kicked them on, and, you know, things seemed to be okay. I didn't have any hermaphrodites. I didn't have.
Is that a panic moment?
Of course, because especially if you're running from seed, which, you know, I guess from anything, but especially seed tends to have, you know, hermaphrodite issues a little more, especially if it's like an F1 or, you know, something untested, something you just put together in your backyard, or some, you know, nowadays most breeders only make F1s. So you don't know how stable that is. And any type of stress like that can definitely cause problems. You know, I know plenty of people who have had that, and then they get several hermaphrodites, and then it seeds the whole room, and they lost everything more or less, or everything's going to extraction because their power went out for 3 days. You know, again, and another big factor is when the power's out, humidity is going to creep up, especially like in my setup. And that could, if you're late in flower, you can lose the whole room to mold. So, you know, it's more than just the light that caused the problem.
So the dehumidifiers got to stay cranking constantly, huh?
Yeah, it's got to run. You know, you got to keep that room. You know, if you're someone who, you know, follows BPD, then, you know, it might get up over 70% sometimes, but most of the time you're running, you know, 55, 60% area. But like I said, there are applications and times when some people run above that. I usually don't, but I also haven't stuck real tight to a VPD schedule. At our new place, I will, once we get up and going, I've got a lot better capabilities to do that. Like with our new controllers and our new system, we can program the VPD and make it all come together so we can follow the whole chart just like they recommend at different times of the cycle and really try to maximize, our yields and our quality.
Do you got some crazy smart apps and shit like that that's tracking your data?
I'm running all Trollmaster stuff. I'm running the Hydro X Pros, which they're like little computers. They're really cool. They're like a 16-inch display touch screen, and they bring everything into one cohesive place. Like I've got my light intensity, my CO2, my heat, my cooling, my dehumidification. I've got my calendar
for every
schedules.
room, or is there one of these controllers for each room?
For each room, every room's got their own designated controller. And what's nice about it is like one feature I really like is the calendar feature, which is like in veg and like at the beginning of my flower. Like the way I operate is I bring everything into my flower room and then I veg it in place. Even though it's the flower room, I still veg it in there for 2 weeks to establish a good root zone in the beds. Once the root zone's established, then I flip it to flower. Well, during that time, you don't really need all that intensity of the lights. And I know you can dim them down and there's ways to do, reduce your power consumption. But some of the big players, in California, guys like Jungle Boys, who've got big facilities, and Cookies and stuff, they did some studies a few years back, couple other guys with these big warehouses about alternating lights every other day. So, got the whole row, one day, light A's on, the next day, and light B's off. The next day, light B's on and light A's off. And it's like that all the way down. So you alternate. So my system with the calendar feature allows me to program that. So throughout the whole flower, through that first 2 weeks, I program it so light A's on one day, light B's on the next, and light A's
it's like
on.
having an automatic timer, but on your calendar on your phone.
On a calendar, and it makes it nice, and it reduces your, power consumption because people say, well, you can just turn them down. Yeah, well, by doing this, I can turn them down and cut it in half.
Yeah, and probably can you do that from like 10 miles down the road? Like if you're fucking
Trollmaster has an app too. Yeah, I can do all that from the app. But it's it's a really nice system. It allows me to ramp up the intensity of my lights. So like when lights come on, they start at 800 ppfd, and for the first hour, they slowly ramp up depending on the cultivar to 1,000 or 1,200 ppfd.
Is that so you don't shock the plants or something?
Right now I don't do that. I just start right out. Like I test them myself. We start at the beginning of flower at 800, and after like a week, I bring it up to 900. Then after 2 weeks, I'm up to 1,000 to 1,200, and I leave it there for 6 weeks, and then do the same thing back down to 800. This just kind of allows you to set it and not have to, just reduces the labor more or less.
Yeah, right. The more you can the more you can automate, for sure. Before we had this meeting, I just had to figure out how to get Zoom to automatically send the invite email, because it's like, oh, I got to set an appointment with you. And then, I got to copy and paste it over here. And then, I got to put it in my calendar. It's like, no, I could just tie it all together.
And automation is, we have the ability to be fully automated, but at the same time, we're going to hand water, to start.
I don't need to be fully automated. I just need to get rid of those few things I do every day that I fucking help.
And that's how I look at it, is like, I don't want to depend on automation entirely.
Right.
Again, because I really like to cultivate cannabis and I want to grow cannabis. So I don't want the machine to do it, but at the same time, I want to utilize some of this technology to help improve,
streamline.
Yeah, just make it more efficient. If I can run the facility with, one less person, but yet we're still fully hands-on, then that's great, and that's what we're trying to do. I just want to focus on bringing as good a product as we possibly can to the market that doesn't give rec like a bad name, that people like, hey, this is good. Like, this is really good. I enjoy this.
I haven't heard a bad word about you out here yet. And there's only,
well, that's good. You know, that's what I try to do.
There's not a lot of you out there.
Right. And that's good too. Right. Like, and that's what, you know, I'm trying to do is just, I never would sit anywhere and say that, you know, product that I cultivate is the best ever. Like, that's not going to happen.
That blueberry muffin is just fucking delicious though, dude.
And that's kind of what I focus on, like, is I try to focus on terps and flavor. Like, that's what I think what kind of sets different people apart is your genetics. And because there's so many out there. There's so many different strains out there.
It's fucking ridiculous, honestly.
Yeah. There's tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands. I'm sure there is that many. So why waste time growing stuff that's, you know, like hay or has no taste or no smell? Like, I get it. We all have grown it because we're looking for the one that doesn't. And that's part of the whole pheno hunt thing, where it can be kind of tough because it's like you don't want to sell mids under your high-end brand or whatever, but you're looking for that next awesome strain. And to get that, you got to wade through some stuff that maybe isn't that awesome, you know, and what do you do with that? Or how do you handle that type of deal? So, you know, those are all concerns that I think a lot of us have in this space, is like,
somebody's got to do that work though, right?
Right. You got to, and how you do it. I shouldn't say you got to, you know, nowadays,
somebody has to, you don't
somebody has to. Nowadays, you know, if you've got the capital, I guess you can, you know, and the time, so to speak, you can reach out to some of these people. Like just last night, I was looking at clones from a couple different people who I really like their work and know they do great work. And I was like, you know, maybe I'll grab 2 or 3 unique clones from this guy. And I go and check out some of his gear, and he's getting $500 and $7,500 per clone. And I'm like, Jesus. I was like, I guess I'm gonna go back to hunting I can't afford that. So
it's not the most I've ever heard, but I mean, the most I ever heard was also insane. It's just like, fuck, man.
Yeah, no, and there's been cuts who have been sold. You know, I've heard of people selling cuts for $100,000. Whether that actually happened or not, I've heard it.
I heard 20. 20 was the most I ever heard.
Yeah, and to me, even 5,000 is crazy. Like, to me, 1,000 is a lot. Like, I've paid, you know, $750, close to 1,000 before for clones, and maybe it's because I didn't, you know, when I did that, and the clone I got and stuff was not, you know, that great, I didn't think, and I just, to me, it wasn't worth it. And I still think maybe that I got fleeced to this day. You know, the guy, you and I have both had stuff with this gentleman who got me for that. So, you know, and maybe that just put a bad taste in my mouth, you know, so I don't trust any of these other people.
I bet that guy's put a bad taste in a lot of mouths.
Right. And it's like, I don't want to go out and spend, you know, another $1,000 on something I think is a certain cultivar, and I find out that it's not. It's some S1 that dude found himself out of a 10-pack. Like we can all do that. So to be sure, you know, the only way to be sure is to do it yourself. It's to take the time, pop the seeds, hunt it yourself, and that takes time. And that's where I guess I can kind of understand how these people are getting, you know, 5,000 and 7,500 for a clone.
And you know, I feel like a lot of these strains are kind of, I've seen a lot of like the same like Skittles and Runts, and like there's kind of similar shit. Like, and so at a certain point, if you're competing with the top level growers, I imagine the only way to set yourself out is to have a unique flavor or something, because you're all fucking killing it at what you do.
Right.
But you got to find that, like, that flavor that sets you apart, really.
Right. That's exactly it. I have a couple strains that I really like, and they're great for commercial production because they produce good. The quality of smoke is great. The look is great, all that. But also, like 8-10 of us in the state of Vermont have the same exact cut. So it's like, is that something that I want to run on a regular? I'm sure I'll run it, so people can compare it to other samples and say, hey, this one was grown, in cocoa with, synthetics. This one was grown in organic, like.
Dude, that's a really good idea. Let me cut you off because you were talking about earlier working together with other people to build this. And boy, that might be an opportunity right there to, and I always thought that would be interesting to see, like, let's take the same genetics, we'll grow it in hydro, we'll grow it like in all these different ways, and see the difference. We'll sit there and taste it. I think that would be interesting, because like, I don't think I could tell personally. If
a big one, if it's grown properly, like either one is grown properly, then it's tough. I mean, as someone who cultivates, like I said, organically, it can be tough. If someone, where salts to me really is noticeable is when they're not flushed properly.
And Nick Smith is one of those guys, and we've had this conversation a ton of times. And honestly, I'm one of those guys who doesn't know how to grow weed. So if you can make it happen, I really can't criticize you. And honestly, I really don't think I could taste the difference. I don't know if there's any difference in, I don't know, residual, whatever kind of shit you add to it. But I think he's got some of the best weed in the state right now, quite frankly. As far as indoor goes, I think it's like Forbin's and him at the moment.
Yeah, no, and that's what I'm saying. Like, there's plenty of guys who grow salt grown, who, it's great. And I grew salt for a lot of years. Like, I was a DWC guy for 4 or 5 years, like deep water culture. Like, and I loved it. My yields and bag appeal were great. But then, I really started thinking about the amount of runoff that I'm dumping down the drain and where that's going. And yeah, sure, it might be going to a treatment plant, but we're learning that it's hard to get, a lot of the phosphorus and nitrogen out. And a lot of times that just ends up back in the watershed. And then that causes all kinds of problems. And when you're growing in especially like a drip system, like, again, it's hard for me to talk about all of them because some people have different dryback times and they approach it differently. But, technically the rule of thumb is like 20% runoff. And if you're doing that 3 to 8 times a day and you've got a couple hundred light setup, I mean, you're putting thousands of gallons of that high phosphorus, high nitrogen mixture down the drain a week. That's getting back into the watershed in some way or another. Now you've got, if you're using Rockwell, now you've got all of that to deal with too.
Oh, right. That's the shit.
Literally don't have use. Yeah, the only use they have for Rockwell right now for recycling purposes is to make like these socks for like road work. They put them along roads to help with water diversion and stuff like that. But that's literally the only thing have found to do. So there's way more Rockwell out there than what they need to do with these. So Rockwell is a horrible thing. And then, you've got the disposal.
Hey, I met a guy in Vegas who makes a version of that's made out of coconut husks. And like, I got to show you that. Remind me after.
Right. And that's what needs to kind of happen in that space. But I'm sure I've never used it, but I'm sure if you talk to guys who grow in Rockwell, they'll tell you there's a reason they're not all using it. Something doesn't dry back the same, or it doesn't retain, or it leaches something that they don't like.
The guy's going to come on the podcast, so I'll ask him all about it.
Yeah, and those would be some things I'd want to know is how does this compare to Rockwell? How are your dry back times compared to Rockwell?
What does that mean, dry back?
So like when you're growing in salts, like, so no-till is a completely different animal than a drip system in Rockwell or even cocoa. Like a dry back is the amount of time. So like when you water your plant, how long you give it until you water it again.
Okay, I got you.
In a hydro system, you want to maximize that dry back time. Like there's that, a lot of these guys will run like a Pinnacle system or something like that, where they'll plug it right into the side of the Rockwell block and they will monitor the moisture content, the EC level, and the PPM. And they will literally
it's like a sensor, this Pinnacle system?
It's a what?
you said this Pinnacle system, you can like monitor your fucking.
Yeah, it's got like a 3-prong probe, and you plug it into the side of one of your blocks, and it'll monitor your EC, your pH, and your water content, moisture, how much you got in that block. And there's a point, like where a plant takes up at optimal growth rates. And then there's a point like right before it starts to wither, so to speak, right before it uses everything up. That's like at its maximum absorption or uptake. It's at it. But once you cross that line, now it starts to be detrimental. Now you're hurting the plant. You're stressing the plant because it's looking for moisture, looking for stuff to uptake, and it can't. So to optimize your growth, you want to hit it with the next watering right before it starts to decline, like right at its peak. It's almost used everything up in that block. You hit it again, and that's called your dry back times. And if you nail your dry back times, like if you really dial those in, you can increase your yields substantially. It's a really important factor.
What if we could talk to the plants?
Yeah, you could probably that. Who knows what that would do? There's a lot of stuff.
So that's it. Like there's really, because I remember Nick telling me about that as well. He's like, oh, every like this often the water comes on for this many seconds, and then boom.
I think Nick is in. I think he's like an organic cocoa. I think, or he's like an organic.
I believe he is doing the cocoa. Don't quote me on that though.
Yeah, I think he's doing like maybe a synganic approach where it's like a little bit of mix of both. Like he uses a lot of organic inputs, but he uses it, which is a really good approach. It's so many ways to do this. Like nobody.
That's what I love about it. Like
right.
Everybody's
nobody does it wrong. For me personally, like I chose my setup because one, I feel it's the most environmentally sustainable way, because even growing in cocoa, you still got to dispose of your cocoa, whether it goes into compost or whatever, you still got to dispose of that, even if you're growing organically. And that was a big thing for me. And that's why I went to no-till, because it's like after every run, you're getting rid of a couple hundred pots of 5-gallon soil that's got, you've got your, either your lava rock or your perlite or whatever you've used in it, you've got that. That's not great for the environment. So you're dumping that in a compost pile. Who knows where that's going to eventually end up if it's an outdoor compost. But you're also wasting all the time it takes for someone to produce that soil, the plastic to bag that soil, the carbon footprint to transport that soil. Like there's so much that goes into that. Even if it's organic, you still got to get it to your door. So I just was looking at that going, why?
It's a great point, Darrick.
Why am I doing this? Like I'm sitting here saying I'm an organic gardener, but I'm not doing anything to help the situation. And that's when I really started looking at, how can I reuse my soil? Because for the first 15 years I grew, I was told you can't reuse your soil. Don't do that. Don't reuse your soil.
I was just going to ask you that.
Like you can't do this. You're going to have so many problems with bugs and imbalances and blah, 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 blah. And so I bought into that, but it was a lot of bro science, and bro science is backed with no facts. It's just like, bro, like I killed it doing this. And people are like, dude, it's great. So I started researching it more and more, and I realized, dude, you can use your soil, and go one step further. Like
you use plastic fucking jugs and shit.
Right, and there's laboratories, right? I mean, UVM does it. I was told UVM's not very good, but they've been fine with me. But that I take a soil sample, I send it to them. I tell them I'm cultivating THC cannabis. I tell them that I'm an organic gardener, and they literally test my soil, and they will tell me, okay, this is your soil reading. This is what you want as a baseline. This is what you got to add back to your soil to get it to where you want it. So you just re-amend it with what they recommend.
You do that every time. You send it back for samples?
Once you do so, you don't have to do it every time. Once you do it a couple times, you kind of see and that's the cool thing I like about it is you see what your plants eat every run. You're like, oh, okay. Every run in a 4x8, I add, you know, X amount of gypsum and X amount of oyster shell and X amount of worm castings and, you know, X amount of kelp meal or whatever you're using. You know, there's a million things you could use. You start seeing that. So you don't have to test it every time. What I start to do is once you figure out what it's using, move to like every quarter. And if when you get it tested, if it's in the range you're looking for, you move to semi-annually. And if it's still there, then you move to annually. But I would say you should get it tested at least once a year. You know,
so
like,
have you used the same soil for a year and then had it tested?
oh God, yeah. So like,
Yeah.
I'm on I'd have to look at my records, but I want to say like some of my beds, I'm on like my 20th cycle. And that's what I love about it.
What are we talking there? Like 5 years?
40 months.
Wait, 40 months. I was thinking 60. Okay, 40.
Yeah,
So that's still like
40
over
months.
3 years
Yeah.
on the same soil.
And it's gotten better. It's gotten better. Like, that's what I love. So I also use a composting method where, so like in the soil food web, when you strip your plant, like when you do anything, if you grew cannabis in your bed and you didn't touch it, you let it grow up and die and decompose back into the soil, you would literally never need to add anything else because you're not taking anything out of the soil. It's in the plant grows up, the plant dies, it decomposes back into the soil. Everything the plant took has gone now back into the soil. But when we're growing cannabis, even if you just took the flowers off, you now have still removed a lot of plant matter that required nutrients to form. So you're gonna have to add something back. And that's what you're trying to figure out. So in my setup, I try not to remove a ton of stuff. Like when I leaf strip, the leaves go down onto the top of the bed and decompose and compost right there. Like when we harvest, we shred the stalks.
So you don't sell your trim, you put it back in the soil.
Yeah, goes right back into the soil. Like the leaves, like trim, that's different. That's at the end. But like any leaf, no, we don't keep the leaf and then try to sell them as biomass. That's compost. Like that's going in, because for me, it's like, if not, I'm gonna have to buy amendments. So is it worth me to bag up that biomass and try to sell it? No, I get more value out of it as compost.
So how much, let me ask you this, how much did you pay for that soil 3 years ago?
Per bag?
For the whole 20-foot row or whatever you said.
Oh, so it was probably, I think it was like, with amendments and everything, probably like $800.
For 3 years of soil.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm getting at. In my mind, that not only is this the most sustainable, or one of the most sustainable ways to cultivate cannabis, but it's also, to me, the most economical, because every single harvest, it gets cheaper and cheaper and cheaper to produce that pound. Because like you said,
every single one, you've never had a up?
It gets because, you know, it's like depreciation type deal. You're buying it up front. And that's another big reason why I think no-till has had a little bit harder time catching on indoors, is because the initial upfront costs are significant compared to, like, if I was just going to get enough soil to run 500 plants in 5-gallon buckets, you know, I would need maybe 3 pallets of soil, maybe 2.5, something like that, 2.5, 3 pallets. Probably not even that many, 2 pallets. And so you're going to be able to get all that soil for, you know, $1,500-$1,600, and you're going to be done with it. But if you set up the whole facility in no-till, you're going to be 15 to 20 times that.
So it sounds like that's going to pay itself off, like,
right,
real quick.
If you're in it for even just 5 years, if you can make it 5 years, by the time you get to that 5th year, like, I follow these guys out in Vegas. I talk to them all the time. They're wicked good people. They're Green Life Productions. I've been out to their place. It's awesome.
What do they do out there?
They're no-till. Like the whole
they're growers.
place.
It's a cultivation.
They're growers. Yeah, they're growers, and they've, you know, in a market that's saturated, they've been able to set themselves apart.
Get them on the show.
A big reason to do that is the fact they're no-till, you know, and they really promote that. So they have done a great job with setting up all the no-till and doing all that, and have helped me tremendously figure out, you know, how to navigate through different things.
You got some good advice or advisors here, man. It's like you got advisors in Vegas, and I got to tell you, I think Nick Matei is just a wizard. Like listening to you guys talk about like fitting the fucking air conditioners and all of that shit. I was just standing. I was like, I'm just gonna stand over here and be dumb for a while.
Yeah, Nick's I believe he's a certified HVAC guy, so he knows a lot about that.
Which is something I have been saying the whole time, that like there should have been someone like that on maybe the advisory committee. And then it's like, yeah, see, this is exactly what I was talking about right here. Like,
yeah, I don't know how he would have time for that. Like, it
no, he
sounds
wouldn't.
nice.
Absolutely, he would never be able to pull
I
it
was
off.
gonna say, like, it sounds nice, but I just don't know how
Someone like that, someone with his
Right.
skill set to build and fix stuff and evaluate. Like, I feel like you said one of your, or maybe your dehumidifiers has like a water recapture or something.
Yeah,
You guys
so
were talking about.
our whole facility, we recapture like all the condensate. We will recapture rainwater, but that was one of those things where I apparently was very naive on how much water adds up on how big a space. Like, I thought, I said, okay, we'll put 1,000-gallon tank, you know, here. And the guy who was going to install it, like, looked at me and he's like, you mean 10,000 gallon? And I was like, no, like 1,000-gallon tank. And he's like, dude, you will fill 1,000-gallon tank. If we are getting a rainstorm that produces, you know, like an inch of rain, he's like, you will fill that tank in like an hour or two. He's like, with a roof the size of yours, he's like, an amount of rain, he's like, you need like at least a 10,000-gallon tank. He's like, because if you're catching rainwater and you want to use it, he's like, what good's 1,000 gallons going to do? He's like, you're going to be using that roughly a day. He's like, so you get one extra day of water. He's like, you need like he's like, I would dare say 20,000-gallon tank, and you need to bury it. And then that way I can put it outside, and through the winter, I don't got to worry about it. We just have to insulate a pipe that comes to the building.
Oh, so it's underground, and you have a pipe that feeds it underground.
And then they would feed it into the building. So basically, I've scrapped that idea until next year, where we can bury the tank and pipe it to the building and do it right. Because that's how I did my water reservoir. Like, we were trying to figure out where we were going to put all these tanks in my building, and it was a little crammed on space. And because I needed like 2,000 gallons roughly to be safe. And that really put a damper on the utility room, like room wise and stuff. And it was one of the plumbers was like, he's like, what's going in it? I said, just water. I said, these are just my water tanks. I said, this 500-gallon tank is the mixing tank. I said, so anything T-wise or inoculant or anything like that is going to go into the 500-gallon mixing tank, and then that's going to get pumped to the rooms. But other than that, it's just going to be water for the other stuff. And the guy was like, well, then why don't you bury it? And I was like, what? We can do that? He's like, do anything you want.
Just give me $20,000.
Yeah, he's like, no, it wasn't that bad, actually, because that was my thing. I'm like, well, what does something like that cost? He's like, no more really, because at that time I hadn't put the floor down. So he's like, no more really than it would cost to put it above. And it was actually cheaper because above ground, I needed poly tanks. And because of everything going on in the world, poly tanks are really pricey right now.
Plastic? Those like big white? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, those big white tanks like are super pricey and super difficult to get.
Huh? That's not good.
It's crazy. So I was able to use a septic tank, more or less. It's a water tank is what they call it, but it looks like a septic tank.
If you pooped in it, it would be a septic tank.
Right. Like it's for, the guy said basically it's for like camps and stuff that can't get water, that they use it, they bury it, and they fill it with water. And that's their water supply. So it's, but that's what it looked like to me. It was like a septic tank. And we got that and we buried it underneath the dry and curing room and put some pumps down to it and put a heater coming off it. So when it gets to the rooms, it's 65 degrees because groundwater's 55 degrees, so we had to warm it up 10 degrees. But that eliminated a ton of space in the utility room. Now we've got all the water storage we need, and it doesn't look like, you know, we have a ton of room left. So that worked out really nice.
Can you clean those tanks if they're buried? Like, do you have
hell
to
yeah, get right down in it, dude.
Oh, word.
I go right down in it with a pressure washer, and like if when you want to drain it, you shut the, so it's got like a float in there. So the way it works is if our condensate, it always stays at a certain level. So if the condensate doesn't fill it, then at the end of the day, this municipal water comes on because it's got like a low water mark. If it gets to a certain point,
Okay.
it fills back up to a certain point. So if the condensate runoff doesn't fill it back up, then it comes on to municipal water, and then it fills up. So then when it comes out of there, it goes up through a filtration system.
What do you got? What do you got for a filtration system?
What kind am I using?
I don't know. What are you doing? Like an RO system?
No,
I was
dude,
just
so
gonna
like-
ask you like how the water quality is.
So I was gonna do an RO originally, but about like 6 years ago, I stopped liking RO because my buddy out in Oregon, him and I had a long conversation about it, and it's really wasteful. Like, and there is some stuff in water that is you want, you know, like
What do
there's
you
some
mean? In what sense?
minerals.
Just in the energy usage?
What's that?
You said it's really wasteful.
Yeah. So have you ever seen how RO water is made?
I mean, I've seen this the systems. I've never like pulled apart the filter.
So, but I mean, like to fill up a 5 gallon barrel or a bucket of RO water, it's going to actually use probably 15 to 25 gallons of water to make that 5 gallons of RO water, because it strips everything out. So you're using a ton of water, and a lot of that stuff it strips out is beneficial. Like there's some minerals in there and stuff like that. There are some stuff that you don't want. So that's what I got. I got a filter to remove, you know, heavy metals, but some of the metals you want. But I got a filter to remove a lot of the heavy metals.
Which metals do you want?
Oh, I lost you for a second.
Sorry. Which
You
metals
want
do you
like
want?
your zinc. Where'd you go?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah,
There
you're
you
good,
are.
man. I got
You
you.
want like your zinc, copper to an extent, and there's a couple other ones in there that if I had the chart in front of me, I could tell you. But you know, there's also ones you don't
All right,
want, like
stumped you.
lead,
Boom.
cadmium, stuff like that. So
Cadmium's bad, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
all that's arsenic.
Barium.
Yeah, and so there are stuff in there you don't want. So I got with the plumbers and we went through the stuff that we didn't want. So they got a filter that removes the chlorine, the chloramine, and some of the heavy metals, but not all. And that's, yeah. So hold on.
Chlorine, that's probably a good one. I can't imagine plants really love chlorine.
Oh, they don't. It's yeah, it's one of those things that you don't want in there, and you can get rid of it without a filter. Chlorine's not hard. You can off gas it. You can just
Really?
put it in a bucket or a big reservoir, take the top off for 24 hours, maybe add some air to it, gets done a little faster.
Really?
But yeah, but chloramine will hold on. You've got to filter that out, or you've got to neutralize it. And depending on your watershed, they may or may not use chloramine. Like where I am, they use it. So I had to get my filter. That was one of the things I had to specifically specify that I needed removed was chloramine.
So they can sort of custom build you a filter.
Oh, heck yeah, which I didn't know before this. Like I had to answer a whole bunch of stuff. Like, what do you want removed from your water?
Shit, I didn't know that was an option.
I didn't either.
All the shit that's bad.
Yeah, that's how I was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't want, and that's when they got me a list, and they were like, well,
yeah, tell me what's in it first.
And I was like, okay, so yeah, it was. And then
Did you have any water samples done from your water?
Yeah, so another location I have, we get tested there like monthly. And our water really, where I am, is not that bad. The biggest thing we really need to remove is chloramine. Other than that, like, there's very, 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 very low amounts of arsenic, which almost all drinking water, I guess, has a little teeny bit because it's naturally.
Where does chloramine come from?
They add it.
Oh, that's like the fluoride program.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Like fluoride, they add it. And I believe, I'm pretty sure I'd have to look at the last test results, but I don't think Newport has fluoride in their water either. Like our water here was not that bad. Like I said, like it's actually pretty good.
Come down to St. J, man.
Yeah, is it not good?
Dude, the St. J water is the fucking worst water in Vermont. Like when we used to have to go over there for basketball games or whatever, and you got to go drink from the water, it was just like, I think I'd rather die. Like it was terrible. Oh God.
Yeah, that sucks. So no, and RO systems are super expensive. Like to cover my plants and my facility, I was getting quotes of like 75 to 100,000. So I was like, oh man, like I don't know about that. Like,
and then you have to change the filter, like replace the filters.
So the system I got has a self-cleaning filter, which is really nice. Yes.
That sounds perfect.
Yeah, that's what I said. It was like an extra $1,000, but I was like, yep, that's idiot proof. Let's just use that.
How does that work?
I think it's a lot like a pool filter. That's the only way I can think about it. Like I've had self-cleaning pool filters before at jobs I've worked at, and it basically runs the flow in reverse for a bit to like blow it back off the filter, and then it goes to like a drain setting where it pulls it down the drain and out of the building. So that's the only way I can think it works.
I never heard of that. Yeah, cool.
That's how the pool filters do it. They literally just blow in reverse, and then instead of refiltering it, so it just gets stuck back on the filter, it goes drain to waste, and it just doesn't hit the filter and goes out of the building. So I'm assuming that's exactly the same way. It's the only way I can think. But
hey, did you have any problems? I feel like maybe you said something about problems with concrete, or you had to like bury a pipe or something.
We had to bury our tank. That's what we've been talking about. We had to bury the tank.
Okay.
Concrete, no, I didn't have much problems. The guy was pretty good. I had a good concrete crew.
You said they got that shit done quick, huh?
Barely. Once they started. The problem was just getting them there. Like they were done in like 2-3 days. 2 guys did a 3,000 square foot floor in no time. So that was really nice. It's just like I said, it was just getting them there. That was the hard part, having labor.
Do you have some non-punctual contractors up there in Derby?
No, I just have some that just don't. What I'm told nonstop is, and I know it's not a lie, it's just they can't get enough help. And so what happens is they come to my job for a day or two, and then they're gone for 3-4 days because they're at other jobs. And then they come back, and that's been the problem, is they don't have enough staff to keep a crew on the job all the time. And that's been the biggest issue. If they would have been able to put, a 4-man crew from the electricians and the plumbers there every day from the middle of June when we started, they would have been done before October 1st, I think. I think they would have been done sometime in September. But because that's not how it happened, here we are, almost to the first of the year, and we're still not quite done.
And there's an order to it. I mean, when we went there after the High Country event there, which was killer, by the way, what a great crowd up there, man. I could tell you didn't even have walls on. And then you posted that video yesterday. It looks like you got white walls now. The ceilings are all done up. Last time all the pipes was exposed. And I imagine if you can't get it done in order, and you're waiting for fucking this guy to show up because this other dude can't work until this dude gets this thing done, like that could get old.
Yeah, we didn't run into much of that. Like the hallway we're leaving purposely because the security company asked if we could leave it open so they could run wires easier, so they could fish wires down easier. So that's why we were waiting so long on that. But it did get to exactly what you said. It got to the point where the plumbers were like, well, we can't put in the sinks till this hallway's done, because so I was like, you know what? Security company's gonna have to fish wires through the wall like everybody else, because I'm not waiting any longer. And I can't help but think, like, when the electricians and the plumbers walk in and that hallway's not done, they look around, they're like, oh, they still got a long time to go. This hallway's not done. And they kind of like turn around and leave. So now when you walk in, it looks a lot more completed. So hopefully, like I said,
it looks close, dude. It looks close.
Yeah, no, the electricians. So I have 3 doors to put on, and then 1 room of trim. Just the veg room has to have trim put on, and then a little bit of the back wall sealed up, which the contractor said they've got like 2 days basically to do everything they've got left to do. They've got like 2 days.
Sick.
The electricians are what I'm waiting on now. Like the plumbers have 2 sinks to install, and that's it. Like they've got 2 sinks to install. So they're pretty much done.
You got all your security in there?
What's that?
You got all your security set up?
Security about halfway.
Do you got Dave Bush doing your security?
No, I got a local company doing it. They've got all their exterior, all the exterior cameras are up. Wi-Fi got brought in yesterday. Cameras in like all the common areas are done, like the hallways, the break room, the utility room, the entryway. So he's still got to do cameras in all the grow rooms, and that's it. So he's probably got 2 days himself, which I would assume this week he would finish that up, because his big thing he was waiting on was the Wi-Fi, so he could do it himself, so he didn't have to pay somebody to stay up in the other room while he adjusted the camera. He can do it from his phone.
That could be a pain in the fucking dick.
So I was like, whatever, as long as you don't hold me up, I don't care. So this should be done this week. Like I said, it's the electricians. They still got to do like green lights in all the grow rooms. They still got to hang 3 rows of lights total, 1 in the mother room, 2 in the bedroom. They still have to add an outlet to 5 grow rooms, and they still have to add the exit signs. And then they still have to set up all the control units for the environmental control. So he's telling me he wants to be done this week. I'm looking around and I don't see it. I'm like, I don't see it.
I was going to say, after what you've told me, that sounds like maybe a couple, and it's the holidays, like that might be January.
Well, that's what I told him. Like our original inspector is retiring. The electrical inspector is retiring like 23rd of January. And I told him, I said, this needs to be done by the 1st of the year, because I do not want a new electrical inspector, some new young guy who's going to do everything, nitpick everything. Like the guy we have right now has been great. He's a cannabis enthusiast. He is all about it. He's the one who designed my electrical room, like he has helped us every step of the way. And he has told me 2 or 3 times, I'm going to be the least of your problems. Because him and I have discussed all the holdups and stuff. And he's like, I promise you, I will not hold you up. He's like, if you guys did everything like the plans show, like Ward Joyce designed for me, he's like, there will be no problems on our end. He's like, we'll be in and out of here. So I want that guy to be the inspector. I don't want some young, dude right out of school trying to make a name for himself. Yeah, being like, oh no, you can't have, exit signs. And that's a concern is them being like, oh, you got to have the illuminated exit sign in every room, when I can't do that because of the plants. It will mess stuff up. Even if it's the green, like if that green film gets broke out or slides down a little or whatever, it can cause a ton of problems. And the current inspector said, no problem, just put a sticker up. Like just put a laminated sticker above the door. We have them, no big deal. Illuminated exit signs outside the grow rooms. Perfect. So I don't want, like I said, some new guy coming in being like, no, you got to have illuminated ones in there and be a stickler about it. So I'm hoping, like I said, that he won't probably finish this coming week, but that week right after Christmas, the week between Christmas and New Year's. I really hope they're able to finish that week and we're able to have our inspection by the CCB and the Vermont Department of Fire Safety right around the same time. Because I've been in touch with the CCB, the Chris, I can't pronounce her last name.
Monica.
Yeah, however, and she's been really, really nice and has told me, as soon as I'm ready, give her like a 2-day notice and 2 or 3 day notice, and she'll be up here, get it inspected and get it turned around super as fast as she can, she said. So,
and I've heard that's a fairly painless process right there also.
Right. She's been super good. And I just want to, get that process done and be done. Because I still have to build the beds, and do all that. I can't do that when everybody's in and out of those rooms. So even if I'm, good to go by 1st of January, it's still going to be 2 or 3 more weeks after that I'm planted. So, I have made arrangements so I can fill a room right off. That's the plan.
But, get one going.
Yeah, I'll be able to fill a room right off and maybe even the second one 3 weeks later. But it's going to take a little bit to get a mother room established, at the new place. Like I said, I'm doing as much as I can now to get ready for that, but space is a major concern. It's like I don't have the space to keep everything that I need at the size I need. So, that will maybe slow things. Like I said, I'm doing everything I can right now with what I got to try to have everything good to go. But I know I'm a realist like this. I just don't have enough space to have enough to fill everything. But probably half. I'll probably be able to fill half pretty quick and then work on the other half.
Yeah, it looked like maybe there was one ceiling in there that was a little low or something that you were commenting on.
That's the mother room.
Is that?
Yeah. So we don't do any flowering or anything in there. So that's not too bad. But yeah, it's only an 8-foot ceiling in there because that's where the trim room and packaging room's above it. So
that's right.
Yeah, we had to split the difference more or less. So we've got 8-foot ceilings in there, but it's only a mother room. So it's going to be totally fine. I grow my mom's bushier than taller.
Oh, you grow them bushy. Is that true?
Yeah, keep them bushy. That's how it works. So I think that, my goal is to have right around 40 different strains, I think is what I'm shooting for. We've got like 20 right now to start with. So got to add 20 more over the coming year or two.
Well, so maybe it's good that you're only starting at half capacity, you like start with what you're used to and then you add on the rest later.
That's exactly it. Like I'm used to managing this amount of moms. So, the only difference is I'm going to be able to allow my moms to get bigger now, which is going to be nice. We're shooting for 500 to 700 cuts off a mom.
I was going to say, because the state's going to let you guys sell clones, right? They agreed to that. If you have
I guess that's what I was reading. Like if you're a cultivation facility and you want to do that, you can. So that's pretty cool.
And is that something you're planning on doing?
I may sell clones to like other cultivators. I don't know about like selling clones just like 1 or 2 at a time to, anybody type deal. I just don't know what that would look like. Like, I don't know if I would, because I wouldn't want that many people coming in and out of my facility, I guess is my concern.
Well, also that might be your customers. Now you just lost a customer.
But if there was like an option to, like if dispensaries were like, hey, we would take a tray of clones to sell, that would be like, okay, that might be of interest for sure. Or like certain stores were like, hey, we would take, dozen clones to sell. Then if I had a retail spot,
you can sell to other cultivators and retailers, right? Is that?
I believe so.
Okay.
I believe so. And I don't know if you can sell to like, I don't know why you couldn't sell to anybody. Like I said, I haven't looked into it a ton because everybody's allowed to grow 6 plants. So it's not illegal to sell clones to anyone. And technically speaking, I think clones fall under the Farm Bill.
Yeah, like it doesn't have the THC content, right?
Right. So I think they fall under the Farm Bill. So
it's like with seeds where you could sell seeds or like right. You don't even need a license for that.
Like last night when I was looking at those clones, that's exactly that's how they were selling them online. So I was like, and they said, we're able to sell these because it falls under the Farm Bill. So if that's the case, then can't you just sell them to anybody? I don't know. Like I said, I ain't researched it enough.
That's a really good question. And I mean, if the logic holds, it would seem to fall into that category.
Yeah, I would think. But, and another thing, like I would sell, like if I did sell clones, they would obviously, you'd have like the clones that you sell to the public. And then you'd also have
your mids clones.
Right. Yeah. What's that?
Your custy clones.
Well, no, just the ones that you don't want to get rid of where you just wouldn't sell. You'd be like, these ones,
sure.
Because you do need a couple strains. Like I'm all about sharing when you can, like I said, there's a handful of us who run some of the same stuff.
Yeah, but if you pay $5,000 for a clone, you don't want to just be giving that out to people.
Right. And that's like, even the clone that I paid, clones that I paid 500 or 1,000 for that turned out to be legit. I can't, when someone asks, oh, can I get that cut from you? It's like, I'll give it to you, but I had to pay $1,000. Like, I'm not going to give it to you for 10 or 15 bucks. Like, you're going to have to pay at least half.
You're going to have to.
So
yeah, that's a tough one right there, because especially, I don't know, weed growers are so generous, man. But like, there comes a point where you got to sort of protect
certain ones, right? You got to have certain, I don't know if you want to call it intellectual property or whatever you want to call it, but you got to have a couple that are yours. That it's like, I've had a couple retailers ask me about, exclusive strains just for their facility, and that's of interest to me for sure. Like, hey, you either want to give me a certain strain or, I'll grow a certain strain, but that requires, like some agreements to be made between both parties. Like, right. I'll produce X amount for you, but you've got to commit to purchasing it over X amount of time.
Sure.
Or it's not
like a futures contract.
Yeah. There. Yeah. So, and I have, like I said, I have three different retailers who they want to do that. And I've said, I'll do that with you. Once we're up and going and rolling, then we can definitely sit down and figure something out where it's like, you want me to grow just this for your store? So
right, like once a year, we're going to bust out 2 pounds of the fucking Bushy Beards, like dumpster haze.
Yeah. So, whatever. Or
and then these fans go crazy and they, I like
whether it be like a monthly, because like we're going to harvest every 2 weeks. So
yeah, or however you break it up,
Right. So we're going to have fresh product pretty often, and that was my goal. Is I don't want to have a bunch of old product sitting around.
Nobody wants that.
Right. I want it to be fresh. But at the same time, sorry, my dog's barking. But at the same time, product by the time it gets to the shelf is still, it's all, if you cure it and stuff, it's going to be 5-6 weeks from harvest date. A lot of times people don't think of that.
After it gets out of biodiagnostics, it might be fucking 2.5 months.
Right. Well, I haven't got my results back from the last batch. They said 15 days. I think it's been longer than that.
I've had people telling me up to a month. I had one guy tell me 35 days. And they're closed right now. They're closed right now till
the 1st, right?
3rd, and they're the only fucking testing lab in the state.
Isn't Steep Hill now open?
Steep Hill is not ready to do pesticides. I talked to Callie the other day. She said they got like 3 out of the 5 tests, because you have to like calibrate your equipment. You have to run it for a while and make sure that you're getting consistent results. And she said they're very close, but they're not quite, they can do 3 out of 5 and not a full panel. And Baya's looking at between 3 to 5 weeks here for turnaround, which is painful. There's just weeds sitting there.
Right. And, if you're curing your product, which I would think a lot of people are, 3 weeks or even 4 weeks isn't that bad if you get your sample to them as soon as it's dry. Like, obviously, don't wait to the curing process to be over and then bring the sample, because then you are going to be way behind. But if you can get it to them, right as the sample gets in that moisture content range, like 11%, 12%, then, even if it takes them 3 weeks, you can be curing it during that time. So it's not the end of the world for someone like myself, because like I said, all my product is 21 to 30 days cured before it goes out the door. So if I got to wait 3 weeks, I'm okay, as long as that's not after the cure. Like, that's where it's like, okay, now it is just sitting here waiting to go, and I'm just waiting on test results. And I really hope that more labs open up,
Yeah, although I think it's also boy, I feel bad for anybody that just like opens up a grow in Brattleboro, man. It's like, okay, every time I want to drop samples off, it's a fucking 6.5 hour round trip drive. Can't send it in the mail.
If I knew more about the lab side of things and I had the resources, I would definitely look into opening a lab. Like,
you should talk to my we got
to me, that's like needed. And if you're somebody who just wants a money grab, to me, there seems to be money to be made there. Like, I don't know enough about equipment, procedures, knowledge, and any of that. I have nothing on a lab. Like, I don't know what's needed, but it seems like if you did, there is a real need for laboratories right now.
Yeah, and although even the Steep Hill is still like in Colchester, like they're all right there. And there's another one on there, Endine too. I don't know what's up with Endine. I've tried to get a hold of them. They got licensed and they're just ghosts, really.
They're not operating.
If they are, they're not answering the phone. God damn it!
That's weird.
They're very ghostly.
To get licensed, don't they got to have the space, right? They got to have the space, don't they?
I mean, I would imagine so. And you have to have more than that. Like, my homie was trying to, well, I'm gonna leave his name. I'm like, yeah, Plantius, whatever. Red Clover Analytics. There we go. He was trying to set up a lab, and it's been a very cumbersome process. And he said he has the space and he has the gear, and it's just, and Callie was just telling me, like, even after you have the space and you have the gear and everything's set up, you got to run these tests for like, it takes a couple of months or a few months sometimes to get your machines all calibrated. Yeah, it's a lot, and you need some smart nerds in there. But
and I don't even know. I don't even know the people who, to get them in there. And that's, so my thing is, like, if you're one of them people and you know what's needed and you can find some funding or have the funding, I would look to do that, because they're, like you said, there's only 2, maybe 3. So it sounds like, are you saying that Red Clover's not doing it anymore?
I actually just got an idea. No, he's having a baby. Good luck, buddy. He's out in Arizona. Their family's out there, so he'll be back soon.
So they're not doing it though?
No, he's still in the works.
Okay.
I'm not sure where he's at. He's been super busy, and I don't want to comment on quite where he's at. But he was definitely trying to set up a lab, and that kid he works his ass off, man. I've really never met a lot of harder working people, man. He's just fucking, and he's super smart. I got a couple people actually, and I got some friends from college. They're in the biotech industry. Maybe I'll turn my. I just told you. Yeah, they're gonna. I was talking about pitching the fine print to them. It's like, maybe we'll turn the fine print into the testing lab, and we'll just run the podcast out of there.
No, I've thought of that kind of stuff. Like, I have thoughts of, like, one day, like down the road, if we get things situated and rolling pretty good, I would love to. I've got a space up in my facility that I would love to turn into like that. I've seen some other growers do it, like a little podcast space where they bring, other cultivators in, and they just kind of, it's like a round table.
Upstairs little part after you land.
That hallway, that long, like that 800 square foot hallway section that I got.
I'd fucking do podcasts out of your room. I could just sleep on the floor up there.
Like I follow the craft farmer, and he's got a sweet, that's what he did. He built a sweet podcast like space in there, and it's just a neat vibe. Like I like that. I think that's cool.
It'd be nice to have a like somewhere to put my drinks and shit, and like a
right.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, I get that for sure. Like having a space is super nice.
I got this weird background. And when I move my
at least you got a background. I couldn't even get mine. It wouldn't even load. It wouldn't even load.
I can't believe I feel dumb that we tried that for so long and we couldn't figure it out.
Right. We spent like an hour trying to get it done, and as you can see, it came out super good. It's
built out like a sick cultivation facility, and you grow a great weed, and we couldn't figure out how to put a background into it.
Get it. I'm pretty sure it's because I got the basic program. Pretty sure that's it.
Need to up your game.
Yeah, definitely do. But as far as the whole cultivation thing, like we're getting there. We're almost there. It's been quite the journey, and I guess, to sum the whole thing up is I guess I just really hope that the camaraderie I've experienced with other cultivators in the state continues, and, and we can all create a market that, supports a handful of people at each location, and if we've got, a handful of locations around the state that, we add to the community, and people don't view, our jobs as, a fringe or a black fringe, on just a not part of society, when they realize, hey, we're contributing and working just as hard as the next guy.
I think you guys work harder than fucking most people I've met, really, honestly. It's ridiculous. Like fucking Nick Matei is living in that fucking warehouse down there.
You have to, though. Like, that's the thing. Like right now, like at the beginning, and that's, like you have to. If you're not there, or someone, if stuff's not happening right now, like for most of us, I can't speak for everyone, but most of us,
I'm at, buddy.
you're going in debt. Like every second, you're going further and further in debt. And who wants to go further and further in debt? And the only way to get out of that is to, grab the bull by the horn, so to speak, and just plug forward and do everything you can do to get, something going. So, and I know that's like when it goes back to that whole, when we're talking about Vermonters a little while ago, we've always done that, whether you burn wood for heat or whatever you do, you always have to do a little extra yourself to get, to make it worthwhile or to get the results you're looking for. And that's the same thing with the cannabis industry. I'm sure there's a couple people in the state that can go out and hire a full staff off the bat, but most of us can't. We can hire about half the amount of people we need.
But here's something I want to add to that. A lot of these companies, especially the big MSOs, you see them coming into the market with these like massive positions, which I think is just ridiculous. Like when people used to start businesses, right? Like say you wanted to start a farm fucking 100 years ago, you have to start growing food. You'd have to like fucking get good at it. You'd have to find some other people to sell it to. They would have to like your food. They'd have to come back and get more, like you had that. And now it's just like, oh, we'll just spend fucking millions of dollars and we'll build out a massive facility. And we'll just do that. It's like, nah, like, and they come in with terrible, like if some of these guys could grow good weed, I might forgive them for some of their shitty behavior, but they're not even growing good weed. They're treating their employees like shit. And it's like, I think that's the best way to go, is to grow like as the demand develops for it, not like come in and just expect we're going to sell $1 billion of weed the first year. And then when you fucking don't even come close to that, then you got to lay everybody off and fuck.
Right. Then you start selling mad packs out the back door. And now you're even affecting the legacy guys, because you're cutting into their livelihood. Because
that's another great point, man.
There's a ton of, there's a ton of, money grabbers on the legacy side too, who just want to flip cheap packs. And they've been around for as long as I've been in the cannabis game, like I could get super awesome herb, in Canada back in the day for, a reasonable price, but nobody really wanted. They wanted me to go and bring them the $1,000 beaster packs because they had good bag appeal, so to speak, and they could flip them for $3,200, and they'd make $1,800 off every pack after it was delivered. And it's like, why not just get the good flower? But they didn't want, people just wanted to make the money. And it's the same type of thing with like an MSO, you know, and pushing their packs out the back door because, like you said, they got this huge facility and now they're going to drop, you know, literally a half a ton on some small town because they got to move it and they're going to sell it for $700-800 for a pound. And these guys in this town have been paying $2,000 a pound or whatever, 1,800. And all of a sudden, oh, I can get this pound for $1,000 cheaper. My customers aren't going to know. I'm going to sell it and I'm going to make, and that, so it affects everybody. It doesn't only affect the guys, the smaller guys like myself and Nick and even smaller guys, like the tier 1 guys. Like, it also affects the legacy guys. It affects the whole market. And it, like, why go that big? Like, I don't know.
And this girl, this woman that I interviewed in Agawam, where Westfield, that got fired from this dispensary, was telling me a lot of concerning things, just like hiring people with no experience, not like amateurs, like zero experience.
Well, that's cheaper labor.
Management. And you know what she said? She said they fired her 3 days before the 90 days where her benefits would have kicked in.
That's a corporate practice for centuries. It's just a form of exploitation. Like, it's been going on for a long time. Like, you know, some companies, it used to be like 6 months to a year. They'd keep you on. Like when I was in college, you heard that a lot. Guys go get these jobs thinking they got these great jobs, get right to the end of where like the good pay starts coming in and the benefits, and then they're let go for who knows what reason. It's made up.
You know what she said? She said the guy didn't even say anything. She said she showed up to work, he opened the door, handed her a check, and did this.
Yeah.
And then pushed her out the door and didn't say a fucking word.
As somebody who has worked, you know, in corporate structure, like I used to work for the Cheesecake Factory back in the day, and I worked for a couple other corporations, but that was the place that I really got to see like corporate structure, because I moved up the ranks a little bit and stuff, and it was very eye-opening. And I learned back then, that was probably 20 years ago, maybe not that long ago, 15 years ago, I learned that corporate America was no place I wanted to be, because you are just a number. Like, no
dude,
matter,
I can't live in that, dude. I can't.
You are like, if you're somebody who can conform to certain things, corporate could be great for you, because you know what to expect, you know what they're looking for, and if you want to play that game, then you can do really well in corporations. But I could not take like the little things, you know, like if you did, like there was no room for explanation. Like they didn't want to hear your side because it didn't matter. Corporate policy dictates if this happens, this is the result of that happening. We don't care the circumstances surrounding that. This is how it is. Whether that means you're written up, you're verbally warned, or you're let go. There was no, they didn't want to hear it. It could have been the best explanation in the world. Didn't matter. And also these corporations, depending on which one you work for, you know, a lot of them are racist. Like, and I don't say that lightly, but I mean it, because with the Cheesecake Factory, I saw it. Like, I was blown away with what upper management said to me. And I still tell this story to this day because it just blew me away. I was there for like 8 months. I started as a line cook. I blew through. I was out of culinary school. I'd worked at fine dining previously. I just went there because they offered me really good pay. So I went there just to check it out. The restaurant was brand new in the area. I lived in Baltimore, and it was just outside of Baltimore.
Oh, this was the Baltimore days.
Yeah, and I lived right outside of Baltimore, and I went, like I said, I got hired right up quick, and I excelled, right? I learned the saute, the grill, the fry layers. I learned the whole line in like 2 months. Most people, I guess, they took them like a year. I learned it quick. They put me on grill, which was like the highest position in the kitchen there. Then they made me their assistant manager, and that was after like 6 months. But we get to like 8 months, and I'm burnt out. Like, There was no room for creativity. I couldn't create any of my own specials. It was follow their recipes. I was a chef, so I didn't like working from a certain recipe. So I went to the management. I said, okay, I'm putting in my notice. I'm sorry. I'm going back to small family-owned restaurants where, we matter and this and that. And the guy, I will always remember this, Caucasian male, about my age at the time, maybe a little older, puts his arm around me. He says, come with me. And we walk out to the line. It's a 40-man line. He goes, what do you see? We're standing at one end. He looked, I said, I see 40 line cooks. He goes, look closer. What do you see? I said, I see 8 saute, 5 grill. Like, I started naming off how many people were in each position. He goes, you're still not looking close enough. And finally, I said, I don't have a clue. I said, I don't know what you're trying to get at. And he goes, how many white people do you see on that line? I said, I don't know, 2. He goes, exactly. Who do you think is going to get promoted first? And there was this guy there, this African-American guy who I'd become friends with, Dave. He was the best on the whole fucking line, like could speak Spanish, could speak French, fluent, like I said, multiple languages, so he could command the whole staff. He should have been running the kitchen. Nope, they were going to promote me over him because I was a white male. And they flat out told me that.
Didn't you just say you were about to quit?
This is his speech to get me to stay. This is what he was trying to tell me, to stay. And he finished,
like, maybe if I get all racist, Darrick.
Right. That's what I was like, what? I said, no. I said, this is even more of a reason I need to go. I said, if you're looking to promote somebody, you need to promote Dave. I said, because that man is the one running this place. He's the one keeping the line cooks in line. I can't speak Spanish. And
40
to me,
people on the line, huh? That's a big kitchen.
Oh, it was huge. It was huge. It was like a $40 million a year cheesecake factory. Like, we pumped out food. Like, it was nuts. Huge place. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. It was like $26 million establishment to build it out. And it was gorgeous, like high tech, everything. Anyway.
Dude, you nailed it though. This
away.
woman from Agawam said the same thing. She brought some issues to the management. She said her job when they hired her was to break up the dirt to get it ready to put in the pots. And she said it was all moldy. And she was like mulling it over, like, oh, should I go tell them or what? And she worked up the nerve and she said, hey guys, like, those shit's all moldy. And they basically just told her to fucking shut up and go back to work. Like,
well, I mean, depending on what type of mold it was, it could have been beneficial if it was organic soil.
Yeah, sure. But like, she was worried about breathing it in and they didn't have masks or nothing. And
definitely should have had PPE if there's any concern there. Like, I use that kind of PPE for a lot of stuff. Like, even spraying like citrus.
Right.
It just, you don't want to breathe any of that.
Oh, dude, a woman just died in Holyoke at a Trulia spot.
I got sensitive lungs. Like, I get like terp lung. Even when I'm mixing hash, just the terpenes that are coming off from the ice water, like, if I breathe that in, I get like dizzy, nauseous, my throat gets tight. Oh yeah, I wear a respirator. Like, I just
full blown.
Yeah, the full blown respirator, not a mask, a respirator, because it gives me terp lung. Like, it locks me right up.
What is terp? I've never heard anyone say that.
It's just like I call it terp lung because it's from the terps, but it like locks me up. Like, I get like all tight in the chest. I get sweaty. I get nauseous. My throat gets real itchy. Like, and I just feel yucky. Like, it's like, ugh. But as long as I wear a respirator, I'm okay. It's weird. So I'm a firm believer of, proper PPE. If you need, like, anytime I'm spraying in veg, I always wear a respirator, even though it's organic. And like I said, mainly what I use is a citric acid and Dawn dish soap and baking soda, or I use crushed chrysanthemums. And either one, chrysanthemums and geraniums with a little bit of rosemary oil. Like, either one of those, I still wear a respirator because that stuff's bad. You don't want to breathe that in. But
probably a great point. Let me ask you a hypothetical question, because I'm just thinking about, like, say you hired 5 employees, right? And you had them all doing different shit. Like, if one of them comes to you with a concern, like, it just seems like these episodes, like, why even bother hiring the people? It's just like, the whole chain is fucked. They don't want to grow a good product. They don't want to hire experienced growers, and they just want to ignore all the problems. Like if you're running a business and your employee comes to you, don't you want to just like maybe take that under advisement?
That's the problem with corporate America. I want to say that's a problem with corporate America, not just corporate cannabis. Like that was my concern with when I worked for corporate America was it didn't matter. Like you didn't matter. Your concern didn't matter. It just didn't matter. What mattered was the bottom line. The two head people at this facility, like the general manager, he was more concerned about hitting certain numbers. So he got his fancy Mercedes and his gas card and his $80,000 bonus. And the owner, he was more concerned about making sure the investors had their dividends and that they were making, and they could have gave two F's about any of us. And that's why, like, I really prefer the family environment of a family-owned business, because a lot of times you are dealing directly with the owner or someone close to them, and your concerns can be legitimately heard, and there could possibly be change. Not saying it will, but you have a lot better chance in small business, I feel, than in corporate America. Corporate America is just not a place for me.
And it's just a miserable feeling thinking like every time you have a problem, it's like, fuck, like now I gotta like.
Oh, it's a process. Depending
like,
on
when we were at idle time and there was raw sewage like leaking down into the basement, it's like I know you guys could smell this, right? It smells like poop down here, like straight up human poop. And
there's doo-doo in the basement.
It's been a couple of days and they didn't even rip out all of the sheetrock. They ripped off, like they had a pipe with like a U casing. They ripped the bottom off and they left these like pieces that were just soaked still. And probably pee-pee. Maybe a little they're just disgusting though. It's they don't care. They're like, honestly, I was expecting they just burn the place down and collect the insurance money when the water damage gets too bad.
Right. Oh, and that's what I think, so far there's only a couple corporate, facilities / cultivators in Vermont. I think there's a couple more who have that we don't really know about that are getting backed by some pretty big investors. But for the most part, I think there's a lot of small business in the cannabis industry in Vermont, which I hope it stays that way.
Me too.
I hope, but you look at a lot of other states and it starts this way, but then it goes, down
exactly. And that, I was actually, somebody was throwing this theory at me that in some states they actually have taken note of how angry people got about the MSOs moving in right away. So these consulting firms have sort of led that they'd be like, all right, we're going to slow play this one. Like tell them we're not going to do it. And then we'll do it later.
I think what's going on right now with like licensing and indoor, I think I don't want to say the whole thing is like a conspiracy or whatever, but I think there is some design to what's going on right now, because I can't help but feel, and I could be way off base with this. This is not anyone from any organization telling me this. It's just viewing it with my own eyes and my own thought, is the state wants MSOs, but like you said, they know that it'll cause problems. So I really can't help but feel they want to go 12, 18 months, hold licenses back a little bit, not license enough. So at the end of that time, they can say, see, we can't meet the demand. We're not doing what we need to. All we're hearing from retailers is they don't have enough product and we need to get them product. And our current model of licensing a bunch of tier 1 people is not working. We need to license a handful of tier 5s or even go to a tier 6. And those couple entities can serve the whole state. And not only does that happen, but they also get to collect their tax revenue much easier.
And I believe if you are a Canadian MSO operating in Vermont, you get a massive capital gains tax break when you send your money back to Canada.
Really?
I don't remember the percentage, but I definitely remember reading about that. On top of being exempt from every fucking other provision that retailers have to pay, like the vape tax and the fucking
Right.
You know, the THC caps and the 50 milligram edible thing.
Right. They can sell what, as up to 100, or can they even go more than that?
I thought they could sell like as much as they want, or 500. I've heard people
So
say
like Series Med, like we could walk into Series Med today, you're saying, and we could get a 500 milligram chocolate bar there.
or cookie. I don't think, yeah, I don't think there's a cap for medical patients.
I didn't realize that. Yeah, that's the type of stuff that's just BS. And like I said, I could be way off base on this, but I can't help but think there's not some of that at play, you know, and that's a real concern of mine is, like you said, are they just holding back going, oh, you wait, we've got this whole plan? Because
I want to clarify too, because you said the state, and one time I said that, and Kyle got mad at me and thought I was talking about the control board. So Kyle, don't worry, buddy. I also agree with you. I think that was house design, maybe.
Right.
The Senate seemed
exactly
more,
right.
the Senate seemed more reasonable. Like even the Republicans in the Senate seem more reasonable than some of these House Democrats on the cannabis stuff, which it's unfortunate that they're supposed to be the good guys, right? The liberal Democrats, like, nah, they were fighting this tooth and nail as well, man.
Yeah. And like I said, I could be way off with that, but I can't help but think there was not something there at play because, you know, it does look good at first glance, like, oh, they're trying to empower the small guy in Vermont. But
well, first impressions are everything. You got to set that first impression.
Yep. And that's what I'm saying. I'm just worried that they're going to pull this in, 12, 18 months. Like, oh, you guys aren't producing. We tried to give it to the locals and you guys just aren't meeting the demand. So we're going to, increase instead. I hope if something like that occurs where the state says, oh, we're not meeting demand, that before they open it up to like MSOs, they go to like local tier 1 or tier 2 or even like tier 3 guys and say, do you have interest in scaling up? Like,
that's a great idea.
Would like to, we're not meeting enough demand. We would, credit you your license fee, something like try to empower the people already here, the locals already here to
maybe subsidize the business for some of the people that were negatively impacted.
Offer like some grant programs,
some actual help,
Right. Say, hey, you wanna upscale to a tier 2 or from a tier 2 to a tier 3 or tier 3, whatever. Like you said, there's some incentive programs we can get you in touch with to make this a reality and put the power back into the local, the Vermonters' hands and not these MSOs. Like,
well, check this out. Here's a shitty story that so the Series Collaborative there, or whatever, it's CBD, whatever it used to be in Southern Vermont Wellness, right? They got sold off to Slang there. So that deal was worked out with TrueLeave as a lender, where they get issued convertible debt to Slang into the tune of like 15 million or something, or 17 million. And at some point, right, you can step in and convert your debt into equity or however it works, which is like a hostile takeover type of deal, right? Like you give this company money and prop them up for a couple of years and then come in and fucking gobble them up later. And that's what I'm worried about. Like if TrueLeave starts coming up here, oh man, I'm gonna be out in the street screaming at people because it's just like we don't need those guys here. And you're absolutely right. Like me and Nick Smith sat around doing math one night. We looked at the market analysis. We looked at the projected supply and demand, and we considered I had numbers from a tier 1 grower, a tier 2, and a tier 3. So we kind of scaled that up to a 5 to see okay, how much could a tier 5 grower put out? And how much is the state projecting as the demand? And we figured it out, with a handful of tier 5 growers, in an indoor,
the whole state.
You could do the whole state, dude.
Easy.
It really doesn't take that much. And if a tier 6 comes into play, it's even less than that. I feel like we figured out that one tier 5 could overwhelm 40 or 50 tier 1s, maybe.
I believe it, because you figure, what's that, 39,000 square feet of flowering canopy? Or is it?
I don't know. I was doing it out. I think we did it by outdoor, 2 pounds of plant or something. Cause you get, say you get 2,500 plants outdoor, that's, you know, you got 5,000 pounds, like, and then say this guy's got his little 100 plants, that's like 200 pounds, you know, like, or however many you can do, 125. So maybe you get 250, and then this guy's got 5,000 pounds, you know, like, it's an overwhelming margin. And I think that they underestimated how quickly a company of that size could saturate a market this small.
Right. That's the big thing, though. This market, you know, and I know the state's looking at, you know, the tourism as, you know, Vermont's a huge tourism state, and we bring in, you know, north of 20 million tourists a year. But how many of them are cannabis consumers? You know, there's a ton of them coming in that are not cannabis consumers. So how many cannabis consumers do we get in that 20 million? Is it 1 million? Is it 3 million? You know, nowadays, I bet it's probably like 5 or 6, or maybe even as high as 10 out of that, because cannabis is definitely consumed more now and more accepted. But still, there's not a need, I don't think, then for a tier 5 or a tier 6 in this state. And if they do come in, and if they've got their stuff together and they're streamlined and they've got their operating cost already figured out, they can definitely put a herding on the market, because they can come in and probably sell packs at 12 to 1,600 package.
Oh, they could sell that shit at a loss if they want to, and just wait you out.
If they're backed enough and their whole goal is to do exactly what you said, gain market
Put you out
share,
of business.
like, oh, our business plan, and this happens in California, and it's been happening, I'm sure, in Colorado and all those places. The business plan is to gain market share. How do we gain market share? They go around, they figure out how many dispensaries they got to put out, or how many growers they got to put out. They see how much capital they have, and like, you do exactly what you said, they sell at a loss because they can lose.
Fuck you, that's why.
Right. It's like, we can lose 20 million a year for the next 10 years because we know we're going to gain 50% of the market share at that point, and then we're going to recoup our, you know, $200 million loss in a 3-year period and be back in the red within 15 years.
All these companies that went out of business that just built out these facilities for us, we can go in there with our real estate companies and buy. I see a lot of that. They're doing these lease. You know how that works. I think probably like you lease a building to yourself or something. A lot of that going on, and so you'll see these MSOs traveling with these big real estate agents and big merger, like SPACs and shit like that, mergers and acquisition guys, and they just gobble up everything. It's like, dude, like, it would be nice. I thought it would be cool if like the money guys just stayed out of this one. Like, you guys don't get to play. You got everything else in the world. Like, we don't need you fucking finance goons. We've been doing this just fine the whole time. We don't need the government either.
It's not how it works. You know, if you got the money, you get to play in whatever area you want.
Well, especially now, dude. I mean, with the speed that money moves around and the interconnectedness of financial markets, and they could just basically, they're like, oh, you guys are gonna legalize weed? Like, we'll get a heads up from our guy in Congress. We'll have the money over there before anybody even gets a chance, and we'll fucking get that first move, you know?
Yeah, and that's what happens. They get in the market first. They're able to set the price point of the market because they can lose or break even because they've got capital coming in. When you've got small guys like, you know, myself and Nick and the tier 2 and tier 1 guys, even smaller, you need every dime of that crop, you know, and you can't start out and lose money for a year or 2 or 3. You've got to almost start making a profit right from the get-go.
Right. Well, it's hard for people to even get financing. Meanwhile, these companies are being publicly traded on Canadian stock exchanges. Like, how the fuck does that work?
Because in Canada, it's federally legal, so they can do that. That's how they can do it. You
could send money across the wire from a illegal country to a legal country. So what if somebody like in I don't know, what if someone in Alabama wanted to send me money up here? Is that the same kind of transaction? Boy, that's it. I'm gonna have to find out about that one.
That's where, you know, like you said, these people have, you know, really good CPAs and really good people doing their books, and they tell them what they can and can't do.
Well, that's clearly how they've got away with it, is parking it in Canadian exchanges, you know, like.
Yeah. And like I said, if you know how to play these markets, if to you it's just numbers on a paper and you're moving around the market.
Yeah, exactly. Just really slide shit around.
Yeah, you're not really seeing the disruption you're causing, is, so to speak, on the ground. You know, it's like the guy flying the drone, bombing the cities in Afghanistan from California. You don't see what you're actually causing. You're just, to you, it's just a game.
And those guys are probably all, even when they lose, they don't seem to lose much,
No, because a lot of them are really smart and they're well insulated. So it sounds like a huge loss, but they've got the people setting it up for them. Like, it's like, you can afford to lose this. If you lose it, you lose it. Like, it's horrible. It sucks, but you're going to be fine. Like, you've got these investments over here, and you're still good to go.
Watching these shareholders get fleeced on, like, I've been cruising Twitter a little bit just because I love watching these idiots. They're just like some of the worst people I've ever met on the internet in my entire life, which is pretty bad. These guys will just like step over their dying mother if Curaleaf's stock would like go up a penny. They're just anything, and they just terrible, stupid. Also, it's like they're complaining about, oh, I'm losing money because of Chuck Schumer, because of political inaction. It's like, no, you're losing money because you invested in a company that is poorly run and managed, that doesn't know how to even produce the fucking product that they're trying to fucking produce, that is in a federally illegal market. Some of them, are owned by sketchy Russian guys. Like, maybe that was just your fault a little bit.
No, there's a lot of that goes on in this country, especially like you said, in the stock market. It's a scary,
it's a lot of pump and dumps, dude. Boris Jordan will go on Twitter and be like, hey, maybe safe banking will pass, and you'll see these shareholders like, cool. Yeah. This is, and then it's
unreal. Like you just said, from a tweet or from a Facebook post or an Instagram post or a TikTok post or something, how these guys can, like you said, pump up a certain stock so they can dump it on the back end, and they make out, and when it's a paper stock, I mean, there's nothing to it. Like, look at the whole Bitcoin thing or the crypto. Like, that guy from, was it FTX? Is that what it was?
I was saying that from the beginning. I was like, this feels just like another scam.
Right. Like, something's off here. And sure, look, it was basically a Ponzi scheme.
My man.
So there's
it can't be hacked. Whoops, he's gone.
Yeah. And you know what's weird is that guy still has like $100 million in assets that he's been able to keep. Like, how does that even work? How does that even happen? That's it. He moved stuff around. He knew the right people. And, a bunch of people lost. Like Tom Brady, I just read this morning, is being sued over that whole thing because he did an FTX commercial. And people, because of what he said, this one guy said he invested his whole life savings because Tom Brady told him it was a good thing to do. And now he's suing Tom Brady because he lost his whole life savings.
And see, those people, it's like, dude, you're a fucking idiot. You lost your life savings.
Right. That's how I feel.
Like, you never, there's this thing about eggs in baskets. Everybody knows it. And if you do it and you lose it all, like, come on, man.
That's
you're probably a gambling addict, really. And honestly, I see, when I see people trading off of tweets, it's like, dude, you're just such a fucking mark. If you're taking Twitter advice,
right, to do your trading, oh, dude, you're a custody. You got custodied hard. And that sucks, dude. Like, but you tell me that these guys don't do insider trading, but look at like Nancy Pelosi. Like, look at her stocks and the stuff she buys. I was watching a thing, like a documentary type thing about a lot of the senators and representatives and their trades, and a whole bunch of them hardly ever get it wrong. How is that possible? It's because
Nancy's husband seems to be the most fucking
one of the best stock traders you've ever heard of. He hardly ever misses.
It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, because yesterday morning, or maybe the morning before, at like 8:29, right before the markets open or something, there was this giant spike in futures markets before it fucking opened. Like, it was weird, like a minute before it opened. And I was watching it. I'll send you the fucking link when we get out of here. They're like, yeah, there's really no other way. Like, only certain people have that information. It's a very tight group. And if it got leaked before the markets open, like, there's really only so many people that, like, oh, hey, you just call your broker, like, hey, buddy, I got a fucking Raytheon's going to bomb Iraq again. Like,
there's a ton of you can't tell me that there's not a ton of insider trading going on.
I can't tell you that I wouldn't do the exact same thing if I was in there.
Right. I can't either, and that's the thing. But I find it funny that, a lot of these people preach holier than thou, and anyway, we're going down.
No, you're right, dude. Democracy, and they're in there just fucking filling their pockets.
Yeah, and the cannabis industry, you know, they a lot of these people view it the same way. Like,
well, John Boehner, look at John Boehner with his company, Acreage Holdings. It's like after a career of fucking bitching about drugs and putting people in jail,
right
now he comes out with a commercial. I remember seeing this commercial. I thought I was on fucking LSD. He's like, I'm going to teach you how to become a millionaire in the cannabis industry. Like,
right? You're like, what? Wait a minute, what? And that's exactly it. People like him, money grab. Like
Howard Dean too. He went to Tilray. He fucking spent his whole career. I'm a doctor. It's bad for you. And then, my daughter tried it once, and now I got a good paying job with Tilray. And
right, and same with like Glass House. That was several policemen, several law enforcement officers.
What was that?
Glass House.
Never heard of it.
Same type of deal. So Glass House is this new one. I don't know who owns them. I think it's just Glass House Incorporated, but they're out in California. They've got I think it's the first or second biggest indoor cultivation facility in the country, and it's owned and operated by several law enforcement officers who spent their life literally putting people away for cannabis.
I did hear about this.
And now they have some type of big corporate backing, and they're, you know, positioning themselves for federal legalization.
They probably used all the money they stole from us for the last all the civil asset forfeiture money.
And the best part is like they're backdooring product like nobody's business.
Who's going to stop them?
Right. The CEO gets a complaint that his product is in New York City in these like boutique dispensaries that aren't licensed. So he gets on a plane, flies over to New York City because he's telling people that they're wrong. He does a video and like rats on himself. He goes in and he's like, yep, this is ours and this is our packaging. I don't know how it's getting here. And it's like, dude, you just basically admitted that somehow your product is going across state lines and nothing happens. Like, they're like,
no one ever accused cops of being the smartest.
No, they're like, oh, you need more. This place is so big. I want to say it's like $100 or $200 million build out. They had to build their own power plant because the local municipality could not even come close to supplying the amount of power they needed. So they had to build I think that like the power plant alone was like $50 million.
Jesus Christ.
That wasn't even to start on the grow part. That was just to get the power they needed. So, I mean, this place is just massive. It's like 1 million square foot canopy. It's like a mile or two around the outside of it. Like it's
so they built themselves a compound. They probably keep all the cocaine in there too, huh?
Oh, probably. Who knows? But these guys just literally, I mean, it's all global. It's all for federal and global legalization.
Well, there's cops on the advisory committee here too in Vermont, which was really disappointing. There was judges and more law enforcement up the chain on like the marijuana commission. And it's just like, why, dude? Like, this was your fault. Like, we don't need you.
Right now,
meanwhile, we can't even get a patient at the table for representation or like someone that actually knows how to grow good weed. It's just like all government.
Like, I can understand the need to have, you know, a legal.
Sure, dude. You got to have lawyers.
But to make it, you know, more than just 1 or 2 spots, like you said, you're giving spots to unqualified people where qualified people could sit.
Seriously, like there's so many smart people in the industry, and you know, like they could, yeah. After what I've seen, I've been watching through the advisory committee meetings. It's like, you know what we should have? An advisory committee that's from Vermont, or maybe a consulting firm.
That's a big thing. That
consulting firm. Well, I misspoke there. The advisory committee is mostly from Vermont. I meant to say like a consulting firm, you know, because that's a whole other can of worms we'll get into the next time. But like, you know, they were at like, hey, does anybody know the local like municipal ordinances? Like, yeah, exactly. You guys, this would have been so much easier if you had people that knew their way around. And you know, a lot of liquor guys in there too, and tobacco guys, and
those are the next ones coming. Like,
oh, they're already in there. The tobacco, they've already maneuvered.
They're already, like you said, they're already testing the waters. They're already probing. They're poised across the border to make big moves over here. They have already made a couple. Like, same with the alcohol companies, you know, like InBev and those guys. Like, they're making moves. So that's another reason, I hope, federal legalization is a little ways off, I hope. And, and I really hope Vermont is able to stick to, like supporting the craft market over, these MSOs. Even if their grow here in Vermont isn't huge, these MSOs got huge grows. Like that's what they do. And they're using the same people to run them. So I don't know. I just hope Vermont is different, a little more like Maine. I know Maine's going through some stuff right now too, and things are changing there, but
Good products coming out of Maine though.
yeah. For a long time though, Maine was mainly, locals, but now I guess something has passed in the last year or 18 months. That's kind of.
Oh yeah, there was a provision about you had to have a residency in Maine, and the state got rid of that with help of some lobbyists and.
Of course.
Yeah, and that hurt, like, yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing. Like Maine was definitely an example. Like I definitely was hoping Vermont would be more like Maine as opposed to Massachusetts, and it kind of seems like we're in between the two. So only time's going to tell. Like that's all we can do is just do the best, grow the best product we can, be as transparent as we can, and just go from there. Try to be good humans, I guess,
That's a good one.
Just try to do the right thing, man.
I'm curious too, because the alcohol, people like to compare, like, oh, we got a good craft beer scene. I'm going for a walk here. We got a good craft beer scene. We could do the same thing with weed, but like even in the craft beer scene, we're starting to see some of those guys get gobbled up as well, in Vermont, which is unfortunate.
That seems to be like the way it goes in Vermont. It seems like if you build a good craft beer, eventually you get to a point where the big guy wants to buy you up so they can have that craft brand under their.
That's the dream though, isn't it? As a business owner, you build your business, you make millions of dollars, you sell it off, and you go fucking sit on an island.
Right. Yeah. I guess. Yeah, it's hard to deny that. Like, I would prefer to build a good business and pass it down the line to family and keep it a Vermont family thing, and support Vermont families. But I also don't fault the people who want to go the route you said, want to build it up big and then as big as they can and then sell it off and go and retire.
No, honestly, like I would just like to have money. If the option was, see, I don't have kids. I don't have no family to pass it down to, which is fine. But like, I might just die and not sell it off to some shithead now that I'm thinking about it,
Well, and you can always, just because you don't have kids don't mean you couldn't meet somebody along the way who's a good person. And
I'll give it to Tasha. She's going to outlive me.
Right. And there you go. And then they take it over. Like my stepbrother ran into a situation like that where he got hooked up with a family owned company. The guy loved him, didn't have, had a couple daughters, but didn't want anything to do with his company. And, before he passed, he offered it to my stepbrother to take over, obviously pay his widow and stuff, the value of the company. But, he didn't go sell out to a big corporation like he could have. He chose somebody to try to help better their lives and their family. And it was a cool thing. So there's options out there.
Yeah, there's still decent people out there too.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are here. And hell yeah.
No, we are. And that's the thing. Vermont's got some really good people, like keep going back to, like, I've been super fortunate to become friends with a good handful of them. And
dude, me too. This has been awesome.
I love the fact that, I can reach out to, I know I bring up Nick a lot, but it's because I talk to Nick a lot because him and I go through a lot of the same stuff. Like we're building
a great guy to talk to. I wish I could talk to him more. He's so fucking busy.
Right. And he's, him and I are, have very similar dreams and passions, and we have a very similar facility type, I'm no-till, he's not. But other than that, our size is similar, and our outlook on the whole thing's similar. And so a lot of the stuff we're going through is very similar. So, I enjoy talking to people like himself. And
at Stowe Cider, that first night I met you guys, I just pulled up a chair and I was like, can I fucking sit here and just listen? Because you guys just fucking go for it, which is great. That's like me and Nick Smith, dude. I talked to that kid on the phone for 5 hours one night. Well, we broke down the market analysis.
What's the thing? Like some people you just hit it off with, and it's nice, and there's more people like that, you know, in Vermont, which I've, you know, enjoyed.
There's a lot of them. I don't mean to single people out, but yeah.
No, I know what you mean, but they're like, we all kind of gravitate towards certain individuals, and we kind of have like interest. And I've been, like I said, really pleasantly surprised with all the people.
Me too, dude. It's been a really nice surprise because I was expecting this after reading the legislation and reading about how the medical licenses got bought up. I was expecting this to just be shithead after shithead and like uncomfortable conversation. And it's just been great, man. There's been a couple of shitheads, but I expect that.
There's always going to be a couple.
Oh yeah. Sometimes it's me.
Right. Yeah, I'm there too. So, you know, I'm hoping in a year from today, the market, you know, everybody that I've been talking to will all be rolling good, and we'll be able to meet the demands of the market without the state having to try to bring in MSOs and push for those and all that. I was told just recently that they are discussing a tier 6, but they decided to scrap it. So I don't know how true that is, but there was at least talk of it. So that means that means behind the scenes there's more than just talk. You know what I mean? Like there's consideration for them to bring it up in. I guess it was brought up in one of the CCB meetings.
You should watch my interview with Julie.
I haven't watched it. I've been so busy at the facility. Like I don't ever even have internet there. I do now, but I miss all the meetings. Like for the most part, I can't listen to them on my phone because we don't get service in the building. So, and the time they're at, I'm always doing something. It's like right in the after 1 o'clock. So I've been to like 3. So I very rarely see them.
I can keep you posted up. Call me up if you got any questions.
I'll do that.
Yo, one more question. I noticed that you sent some donations down to the little event that Amelia put on there, and sent some gummies down. Those were fucking fantastic.
Oh, awesome. No, I love those. Like, I really think they're one of the best ones I've tried. Like, they're different than everybody else's.
100%.
Everybody else's gummy is more like a gummy worm, you know, like that harder, spongier, you know, more chewy type gummy. Mine are more like a gummy melt. Like,
yeah, dude, it does just melt, bro.
Right. And like, I like to keep mine in the fridge because it makes them a little.
They do get a little soft if they get hot.
Right. If they get warm, then they literally like almost melt in your mouth. Like you're not going to chew them. But
I had to pick some pieces out of the bag. I was like fishing them out.
I like to keep mine in the fridge so they get like a little bit. They still melt and they're still super soft, but they're just a little bit more firm. But I have most of the people that I talk with, they like them the opposite. They like them like at room temperature. And so they just dissolve, but they're gluten-free and they're vegan.
Oh, hell yeah.
So that's kind of nice too. And the other thing is they're hash rosin and they're not distillate. So, and they're or I shouldn't use that word, but they're a broad spectrum hash rosin. So they're, you know, you're getting the full effect from the product. You're not just getting THC. Like, and if you're looking for a medical product or a product to help with, you know, some ailments and stuff, distillate gummies or distillate edibles are not going to really do much for you. Like,
I thought you said, was it you that said that distillate kind of gives you a headache?
Yeah, distillate doesn't set well with me. Gives me like a headache, makes me feel funny. Like, it's just THC. So it doesn't, I don't know, just doesn't do well with me.
I got to say, after trying some rosin carts, boy, I don't know if I'm going back to distillate carts.
Right. No, I won't even touch a distillate cart. Like if I get any carts, it's going to be a rosin cart. And that's just because of the effects. And,
it works.
I get it, rosin stuff, so usually a little bit more expensive, but at the end of the day, that to me is just a better effect. It just feels better. It makes me feel better. It helps with, you know, if you've got any type of like nausea type stuff.
It's great for sleeping, dude.
Right. You get in that full synergenic effect as opposed to distillate, which is just the THC.
And I actually found I was smoking less too. Like when I was I'd take a couple dabs of some hash rosin. I got the Puffco over there. I actually found that I thought it would be more expensive, and it's certainly like by the gram, it's definitely more expensive. But I found myself spending less money because I could take like 2 or 3 little hits, and I take little bitch fucking
Right.
dabs, like the
Well,
ones the state tells you to start with. That's what I do.
right. Well, in Puffco's, I tend to find like Puffco's tend to make your product go further. You know, it doesn't burn it up as quick as like when you use a rig. Even if you're using like a temp right or a dab right, like these just seem to work really good.
And I usually get 2 hits. Even when I put like a small one in, I'll usually have a second one in there. So they do. It's such a tiny amount of product. And it really, I'm like, dude, I could take like a nice 1 or 2 hits in the morning and I'm good for like 3-4 hours. And I'm, maybe a one for lunch, one for dinner. Like, and I still got some flour kicking around. So it's been nice. Tinctures I really like, man. I got some MCT oil tincture over there. Which is nice, dude. You could actually, the kid was like, rub it on your skin. I was like, you want me to put tincture on my skin? He's like, yeah, it's just MCT oil. He's like, and you got arthritis. So if you ever have any pain, it's the first topical thing I ever tried that actually seemed to have some kind of effect.
Yeah, no, I use topical from guys at Gaston Weed Co gave me some that works pretty well.
Oh, cool.
I like, and same with guys at Highly Rooted gave me some and works pretty well too. You know, Troy and Michelle are good peeps and they make good products, and I like that, and I've known Troy and I go way back. So I like to see, people like him making it in this space. And I know like him and I went to culinary school together way back in the day, like high school. We went.
No shit.
Yeah, we joined the same culinary program.
Sick.
And that's where I met him. So I know, Troy knows how to make quality products and knows what to do. And I know he has a passion for cannabis, which
he sure does. He's had to save his life.
Yeah. No, I did. Troy's been through a lot. That's not my story to get into, but he's had to deal with a lot. And yeah, he told me the same thing. He gives cannabis a ton of credit for him, being able to do what he does to this day, which is awesome.
It was fucking amazing. He told that story when he came on, and I was just like, fuck yeah. Like,
yeah, for him to go through what he had to go through at his age twice is no less than a miracle, really, in my opinion. Like,
and it would be nice to hear some of those stories in these board meetings and in these legislative sessions. So these people, it's like, instead of all this fear porn, like, oh, it might cause a psychosis. Like, yeah, it also might like stop someone from dying of cancer. Okay. Right. And here's one of them right here. Like, we need more science. Like, oh, here's living science right here. Boom. There's a case
what he says, even his doctors, couldn't tell him it wasn't because of his cannabis. They said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it because it's working. And he said the only thing he was doing was he was taking a regimen of Rick Simpson oil, like a medicated regimen. So
I've heard it's like a gram a day. My man Fran Janik said the protocol is like 1 gram a day for like 60 days or something.
Yeah.
Which seems like a lot, dude, because
it is at first. It is at first. And I remember
probably got to ramp up there.
You sleep a lot the first like week. He's like, you sleep a lot, but after that, your body gets used to it and you can, I believe me, if I went through it, I would try anything. Try anything.
For real. And some of those cancer drugs like can also like give you cancer, I think. Like,
right. Isn't that an oxymoron?
The radiation, it just looks horrible, like the toll it takes on your body. He said actually one of the things that I thought was interesting, because my grandma had cancer. She was all like, her feet would get tingly, right? Like you get that like necropathy or something. You get tingly hands and feet. He said he never got any of that. He said he was up walking around. He didn't lose any weight.
Yeah.
I'm like, yo, you got to write that, at least take a note of that, right? Somebody should, like, a Department of Health, maybe you could put that on a pamphlet. Like, yeah, like one time a kid freaked out on edibles, and then look at Troy. Hey, just for some balance, man, it would be nice.
Nope, I'm with you, but we got a long way to go still. And one last thing before we go. I gotta finish.
Yeah. First, let me thank you for your time and say happy birthday one more time. This has been fantastic.
It's great talking to you. Like always, we talked for a long time. So
I talked to you all night probably, but I always leave the last word for my guests. So if you got any shameless plugs or any people you want to shout out or just final thoughts.
No plugs. I mean, just, obviously look for some products when we get there. Hopefully the next 3 months they'll be on shelves, but yeah, right. Fingers crossed. But no, my biggest thing is I hope a lot of us, I guess the only thing I can say is, as a cultivator to other cultivators or retailers or whatever, let's not forget the medical program. Vermont has a very poor medical program, and
Terrible.
there are people who truly do need it as a medical, ailment or medical, whatever you want to call it, relief, benefit, however you want to look at it. But, a lot of other states have forgotten the medical program. It kind of just gets absorbed up into the rec program. And if that's the case here in Vermont, then the caps have to be removed and vape taxes have to be removed.
The board is going to suggest that in the next legislative session.
It needs to, because and it would be nice if there was something the board did to designate medical patients, getting don't have to pay tax, or are able to get, that would be a retailer thing, get discount or something.
I think Eddie at Winooski Organics said he's going to waive the tax for medical patients anyway.
But see, that's on him. And that's too bad that this small retailer has to take that upon themselves and come.
He doesn't have to take it. He did it. He chose to, and I respect the fuck out of it.
No, I know, I do too. But I mean, the only option he had was for him to do it himself, because the state is not stepping up to do it. And that's what I mean by it's too bad. I applaud Eddie for doing that, and he's a stand-up dude, so I'm not surprised at all.
There's some other people doing it. I want to say maybe Green State, maybe Matt Lindemer. I know some of them are doing discounts for veterans. Some of them are doing discounts.
And all that's awesome. I just mean it'd be cool to see the state make it so it's hey, you sold, a little small mom and pop retailer does not have to take that hit. The state
subsidize that shit. Yeah.
Liable. Hey, you sold $1,000 in product to medical patients. You don't owe us tax on that. But the way it is now, if Ed sells $1,000, even if it's 2 medical patients and he didn't charge him tax, he still has to pay the state the tax.
You just charge him $80 an eighth.
Right. Yeah. And you're not getting a tax. Wink, wink. So, it would be nice to see some changes like that, just somehow to keep, because a lot of times people, again, who truly need it for medical, don't have the resources to afford a dispensary.
Or to even get to one, honestly.
Or get to one, or, I have a couple older gentlemen who, when I went down the rec market, got very, very scared because they're true medical patients and I'm their caregiver. And it's they're like, what are we going to do? They didn't know, they can't go to a dispensary. They're on a fixed income, but yet they depend on cannabis for, symptom relief. And literally one of them brought him to tears, he was so worried. So there's a lot of people out there like that. And I just don't want anyone to forget him. We got to try to do something. And I know it's tough, but if we all do a little bit, maybe.
I don't think it's that tough. I think the regulations are making it tough. I think this is an easy problem to solve.
And I think so too. I think it could be, but if they haven't, and that's my concern. And I just hope, and I know there's some advocate groups out there doing great work, and this is right on the top of their priority list. And that's why, I try to, with Amelia, if they need help with that, their organization, I try to do what I can, because
she's awesome.
This is what they stand for. They want medical patients to have access. And yeah.
If you've ever heard me say anything smart about the medical program, I probably got some information from her.
Right. That's what I mean. They do good work, and I don't think they're going to give up until they get change. And that's great. It's just, how long is that change going to take? And maybe if we all do a little bit, then the change will happen faster than than it would have otherwise.
Well, I'll be over there in Montpelier sitting in on these sessions. Hell yeah. Thanks again.
My man.
Yeah. This has been a pleasure. Tell Brooke I said hi, man.
I will.
Good luck with the rest of your build out there, your clean out, and happy birthday one more time. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah,
man.
once it's done over there and my Wi-Fi is working all good, we can do like a 15-20 minute if you want to see like a tour of it. I can bring the computer and we can do a walkthrough, and I can give you a layout probably in like a month, 5 weeks, something like that. We could catch back up and I could give you a tour.
I'd love to.
All right, sounds good, homie.
Take care, buddy.
I have a good one.